My great kingdom of Italy. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376. The Kaiser apologizes. Your Majesty, this is the internal combustion engine I invented using diesel as raw material. Its power is 25 horsepower. As the inventor of the diesel engine, Rudolf Diesel was explaining his invention to Carlo, explaining its excellence in terms of various indicators. In fact, there is no need for Diesel to explain. How could Carlo not understand the excellence of diesel engines? Otherwise, he would not have come in such a hurry. You must know that it takes half a day to take the train from Rome to Milan, let alone go back. This is a day's delay. It's just that Carlo came over excitedly to find this real diesel engine, which was a little different from what he imagined. Instead, it looked like a vertical steam engine. Of course, no matter how this first generation diesel engine is, its broad future is visible. But now, we still need to consider practical issues. What can I say about this diesel engine? In the face of Carlo, who dares to say no without being wise? Your Majesty, please speak. Under the attention of everyone, including inventor Rudolf Diesel, Carlo spoke. As for the characteristics of diesel engines, I think Professor Diesel has made it very clear. So based on its characteristics, I think diesel engines need to be researched in two directions. The first is to increase the size and strive towards engineering power and ship power, because compared with starting from the steam engines currently used in various countries, the advantages of diesel engines are obvious. The second is miniaturization. The powerful horsepower of diesel engines can also be used as vehicle power. Of course, this requires continued research. At present, this is definitely not possible. What Carlo was referring to was the first generation diesel engine in operation. This diesel engine, which was fixed on a steel frame, had a large shaking range that could be observed with the naked eye. It was definitely not good as a vehicle power. Carlo's words embarrassed the inventor Diesel, although he knew it might be an unintentional mistake by the king. Carlo also observed that his words embarrassed the inventor, and quickly said, "This is just my humble opinion. It is up to you, the inventor, to decide how to determine the specific research direction." Carlo's words made Diesel feel better. How could he not be moved when Carlo respected him so much as a monarch? "Thank you for your attention, Your Majesty. I will work hard to produce satisfactory results. Don't worry, if you achieve outstanding results, Baron Tesla will be your role model." Carlo's words surprised everyone. You must know that Tesla is a legend. This Serbian inventor, electrician, physicist, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, and chemist is recognized as a master of commercial electricity and the first person in Italy to apply science in practice. In order to commend this world-class master, various Italian certificates and medals were given to him for free. In addition, King Carlo even awarded him a knighthood for his merits. It can be said that Tesla has reached its peak in terms of reputation. As for money, Tesla has no shortage of it. The whole world can see the benefits of alternating current, and Westinghouse Electric Company has never been short of orders. And Tesla, which owns some shares, will not be short of money. Of course, it cannot be said that there is no shortage. This person has recently begun to think about transmitting power to devices through wireless transmission. It requires a lot of funds. He went to the person in charge of the Quirinal Electric Power Laboratory, but did not get the results he wanted, so he wanted to talk to his friend Carlo for some support. Carlo compared Diesel to Tesla. Even if it was a form of flattery, it can be said that he took it very seriously. Faced with Carlo's high regard, what else could Diesel say? He could only hold Carlo's hand and answer forcefully, "Your Majesty, please rest assured, I will definitely do it." Definitely, yes. In this era of decline of nobility, this identity is very tempting to most people. Scientists are also human beings, and they also have emotions and desires. Carlo made such a promise to Diesel because he also valued the use of diesel engines. Diesel engines are widely used. Currently, they can be used in mines, docks, and ship power, especially for river vessels. Bulky steam engines are really not suitable. Diesel engines are uniquely suited to be used on inland river vessels. After Carlo visited the diesel engine, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he visited some other departments under the leadership of the person in charge, such as the always popular gasoline engine. Compared with the newly born diesel engine, there are more people and types of gasoline engine researchers. In addition to developing gasoline engines for automobiles, Carlo is aware of the research on gasoline engines, such as large-scale high-standard models, etc. Italy is definitely leading the way to the front point. Of course, Carlo needs to seriously consider how to transform the technical advantages of gasoline engines into other advantages. Visiting the various products of the power laboratory opened Carlo's eyes, and time secretly passed by in this situation. By the time Carlo came out of the power test room, it was already getting late. Your Majesty, would you like to rest for one night in Milan? The newly appointed captain of the guard, McClun, stepped forward to ask Carlo what he meant. Baron Filmic was over 60 years old, and his aging body had already made him unable to do his job as captain of the bodyguard. The idea of resigning was proposed to Carlo many times before, but Carlo rejected it because there was no suitable candidate for the time being. The position of captain of the guard is very important, and it cannot be done without Carlo's approval, and McClun is someone Carlo has gradually been able to trust over the years. It's better to take a night's rest. Carlo thought for a while and replied, after all, it was not appropriate to go back at night. Okay, Your Majesty, we are going to the Palace of Milan right now. The most indispensable thing in Italy is palace architecture, which can be found everywhere, including Milan. This is a palace built in the Middle Ages and owned by the Italian royal family, so it can be used as a hotel point. And just as Carlo got on the carriage and was about to set off, he saw the captain of the guard, McClun, knocking on the door. Your Majesty, there is an urgent message from Rome. Upon hearing the emergency call, Carlo immediately opened the car door and took it. It wasn't an urgent matter, there was no need to send an emergency call, so Carlo was also curious. When he opened the telegram, Carlo breathed a sigh of relief. This was not a domestic matter. In fact, this matter has little to do with Italy. It was William II who apologized for the previous telegram incident. The Kaiser, who could not withstand his anger against Britain, had to write to Queen Victoria to defend himself. I never intended to use this telegram against Britain or your government. Listen, is this an apology? It sounds like the wronged person is complaining that the other person is too excited. Well, according to Carlo's understanding, the Kaiser had been wronged and had to make amends, so the German Navy's first act was a very powerful response. I just don't know what good is the German Navy, which has received technical support from Italy, will come up with. Chapter 377 Apple's Machinery Factory. To see the excitement in Britain and Germany, you need to stand a little further away, otherwise you may be accidentally injured. Of course, the most important thing is that you have to be strong enough, otherwise the possibility of being accidentally injured will greatly increase. For Carlo, strengthening Italy's strength is something that must be done at every moment. After returning to Rome, Carlo immediately found the Minister of Industry, Gregory Medici, to discuss the construction of a diesel engine factory. Isn't this a little too hasty? In fact, there is no rush at all. It takes time to plan the place, organize the land, connect water and electricity, and build factories. And by then, I believe that diesel, which has full support, will have a new diesel engine. Carlo made it so obvious. How could the person in charge of the power laboratory not understand this? Of course, he fully supports the work of Professor Diesel, who may become the next Baron Tesla. Therefore, building a factory really requires planning in advance. Your Majesty, are you saying that you want to build an internal combustion engine factory that uses diesel as fuel? Faced with the confusion of the Minister of Industry, Carlo did not want to explain anything and answered directly. Yes, it would be best to have enough land for development. Although Carlo's words did not make the Minister of Industry understand the importance of this diesel-fueled internal combustion engine, it was enough for him to at least know that the king valued it. In fact, there is also an official culture in Italy, and instructions from Carlo can make officials move faster. Your Majesty, in that case, I suggest it is best to place it in Naples. Gregory Medici immediately gave his reasons. I have considered that there is a lot of industrial land in the suburbs of Naples, and infrastructure such as water and electricity is not bad in Naples. In addition, Naples has a port that is convenient for transportation. And since it is producing internal combustion engines, it requires various materials, including the Naples steel plant and other. There is no shortage of metal fabrication plants to meet its requirements. Another advantage is that there is a lot of idle labor in Naples, so it is easier to recruit workers here. Well, this last one is indeed a reason, and it is the most important reason. Because at the top of the government, there is an open secret that cannot be revealed. If you need to build a factory and there are two places with similar conditions, but one is in the south and the other is in the north, then there is no need to consider it, and you must choose the south point. That's right, it's that extreme point. In order to reduce the economic gap between northern and southern Italy, the Italian government has racked its brains. The south lacks industry to accommodate the excess population. This is easy to handle. The government will give priority to the south for new factories. Moreover, after discovering coal and non-ferrous metals in Kosovo and high-quality iron ore in Libya, steel plants were built in the south to drive economic development in the south point. After a series of efforts by the government, the southern economy has finally improved, and the gap with the north has not widened. That's right. Even if the economy has not expanded or decreased, the gap will still be the same as it should be. There is no way. Compared with the mature economic development in the north, the economic development in the south is still lacking, even with government encouragement. Of course, there is another important factor, and that is the terrain and location. Let's not talk about the terrain. Compared with the hills in the south, there is still a good Po River plain in the north. It is precisely because of this plain that Venice, Milan, Turin and other cities have developed. In addition, in terms of location, the north is obviously close to France, Germany, and Austria, making trade with the three countries more convenient and conducive to the development of industry. This is an absolute geographical location, and cannot be changed at all. Therefore, it is simply impossible for Italy to want the south to surpass the north, unless the south suddenly discovers massive mineral resources. In this case, the most important thing is to prevent the north from widening the gap with the south. And to be fair, the Italian government has done a very good job in these years, so some things really cannot be determined by man or nature. Gregory, Naples is a good choice. Then let's put the factory that produces diesel engines here. Therefore, when faced with the choice of the Minister of Industry, Carlo also recognized it. In the future, relying on this diesel engine factory, it can be extended to tractor factories, inland shipyards, and industrial diesel engine factories. By the way, there is also power generation. Diesel engine power generation is a perfect choice for places that are short of water and have oil. Your Majesty, I will go back immediately to urge Naples to clear a piece of land and prepare it for factory construction. After seeing off the Minister of Industry, Carlo stood by the wall and looked at the map of Libya above. Carlo certainly knew what Libya had to offer besides iron ore. He had previously considered that the industrial demand for oil was very small, and it was not cost effective to develop Libyan oil for this purpose, so he left it until shade. But now, it may be time to develop it. As long as it is developed, the black industrial blood under Libyan soil will surely contribute to Italian industry. However, it is not easy to exploit this gift of nature. Carlo vaguely remembered that Libya's oil was 1,000 to 1,500 meters deep underground, but he couldn't remember the specifics. In addition, Carlo can only remember the general direction of the oil point, but it doesn't matter. The technology isn't simple enough. Just buy it. No one has trouble with money, and the United States currently has the best oil extraction technology. Those young guys are really lucky. They have everything in the land and there is no need to purchase resources from outside. It is indeed the best land on earth in the industrial era. Mobil has the best oil extraction technology in the United States. I believe Rockefeller would not dislike the taste of Lira. As for the location of the Libyan oil fields, Carlo only remembered a rough idea. He drew 1/3 of the shares on the map facing Libya's seaside. These should be enough. There can't be more. That's right. Since Carlo can only remember a rough idea, he will use a arrogant method. That is, send more exploration teams and use the human wave tactic to achieve his goal. Give this to the managing director of Petro Italy, Carlo. Asked the guard to hand over his request to General Manager Martino, believing that he would know how to do it. Carlo was right. The next day, General Manager Martino sent a telegram to Mobil in the name of Italian Petroleum Company, wanting to purchase its deep drilling technology. Carlo was right. Faced with the telegram from the Italian oil company asking for technology, Mobil acted happily and sold it for money. As long as you give enough money, anything can be said. Even the most experienced exploration teams have it. Mobil showed such enthusiasm. On the one hand, Italian oil companies have no competitive relationship with Mobil. On the other hand, they also want to form a good relationship. For Mobil, which is about to monopolize American oil, expanding to Europe is an inevitable choice, so it is reasonable to make good friends with a local oil company. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378 Proposal. The cold winter season is not too cold for Italy, which is protected by the Alps, especially for the capital, Rome. So Carlo, who wore more thick clothes, still felt comfortable. Of course, his mood is quite comfortable now. Look, the new US shipbuilding plan is really not cheap. With 4 warships costing $30 million, it's really a wealthy now though rich. Faced with Carlo's words, Foreign Minister Bacona, who brought the news, immediately said, "Your Majesty, this is enough to show that the Americans' target is Spain, otherwise they would not have urgently added 4 warships." What the two were talking about was that the Americans had opened 4 new warships. In fact, this doesn't matter. Which great power doesn't build warships? But this time the warships built by the Americans are a little different. This time the United States started building cruise ships. You must know that the Americans have never built a cruise ship before, and this one is more than 10,000 tons. Do you still need to specify the target? In addition, according to what Italy learned, the performance indicators of this American cruise ship are very close to the 2 new cruise ships purchased by Spain. It may be due to experience, or because the research on its own rapid fire cannon is not smooth. In terms of firepower, the United States chose 4 305mm main guns for its own patrol guns. On the other secondary main guns, it installed 10 152mm rapid fire cannons. In addition, in terms of speed, the American cruise ship plans to install 2 vertical 3 expansion engines with an expected output of 20,000 horsepower, which can push its new cruise ship to a maximum speed of 21.5 knots. In addition, in terms of armor, this model is thicker than the one purchased by Spain. The 127 to 203mm main armor belt of the hull is not bad. In addition, the thickest armor of the turret and command tower is 203mm. Of course, compared with the crap armor steel used in Italy, although the Harvey armor steel installed in the United States is thicker, in actual protection, Italy wins as for speed. American warship designers who designed cruise ships for the first time also lacked experience, so in pursuit of speed, they could only get close, but not better as. For firepower, it's not that Carlo underestimates the firepower configuration of the United States, but the power of the 8 main gun rapid fire cannons can teach him a lesson. In terms of firepower, protection, speed, this American patrol is almost boring. Of course, this is understandable considering that the United States is designing a patrol for the first time and its Navy has just begun large-scale construction. When I heard that the US Navy was seeking funding for shipbuilding this time, New York Police Commissioner Theodore Roosevelt was jumping up and down and was said to be more anxious than Secretary of the Navy Lewis. Theodore Roosevelt, Carlo, is certainly no stranger to this name. Anyone who knows a little about American history will never forget him. The elder Roosevelt was one of the key figures in the development of the US Navy. He practiced his friend Mahon's theory of sea power, and at the same time, made the US Navy a presence that cannot be ignored in the world's naval power. And this Theodore Roosevelt did many things. As we all know, he pushed the United States to declare war on Spain, and he also organized a volunteer group to personally participate in the war. In addition, he made the world know the United States again, and sailed around the world with the Great White Fleet promoted after taking office. He also ordered the construction of the Panama Canal, the world's 3 major choke points. These achievements alone would be praised by anyone, let alone concentrated on him alone. He is worthy of being called the 4 giants, 4 statues, on Capitol Hill. Of course, if there was not a more outstanding nephew behind him, then Mr. Theodore Roosevelt should be the greatest president of the United States in the first half of the 20th century. Of course, the reality is not bad. Later generations have always ranked 3 to 5 among the greatest presidents of the United States. But Carlo also knows that many times great people happen to be in the right place, and it is fate that makes him achieve his success. At another time, there might not be such a thing at all. Of course, Theodore Roosevelt is still a minor player now. He only started his political career after being influenced by the Spanish-American War and becoming well known to Americans. As for now, let the wise and mighty Carlo teach the Yankees a lesson. Have the Spanish been notified? It was clear that this kind of news needed to be shared, and there was no better outcome than with the Spanish. Foreign Minister Bacona immediately replied, "Your Majesty, I have asked the ambassador in Madrid to inform the Spanish government. However, I cannot estimate the specific reaction of Spain." It was obvious that the foreign secretary had thought of Carlo's wishes and notified the Spaniards in advance. However, just informing Madrid made Carlo a little reluctant. If the Yankees taste the sweetness of expansion, they will be out of control. Your Excellency Bacona, what do you think about us using the barter model to continue to provide Spain with 2 to 3 warships? Carlo thought of the 3 Turin-class ships that have been in service for many years and have made great achievements. Your Majesty, it's best to wait until Spain brings it up before we discuss this matter. Now we'd better wait and see Spain's reaction first. Bacona, who was startled by Carlo's words, quickly gave up the idea. There is no need to rush this matter. Don't make Italy more anxious than Spain. Bacona's words made Carlo realize that his mentality was not right. Maybe he paid too much attention to the United States and was in trouble. If he had any relations, he immediately spoke. "Your Excellency Bacona, you are right. There is no rush in this matter," Bacona said immediately after seeing that the king's random thoughts were dispelled. "Your Majesty, if nothing happens, I'll leave first. There are still a lot of things at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You go." Carlo, who felt that his condition was a little bad recently, what else could he say? Of course he had to let his minister go. After Bacona left, Carlo also planned to take a rest and visit the Queen and little Vittorio. It needs to be mentioned here that Carlo and Queen Maria finally had offspring. Prince Vittorio is the continuation of Carlo's bloodline and left direct evidence that he came here. The King of Italy has an heir, which also makes many people in the Savoy family and the kingdom breathe a sigh of relief. Although there have been many incidents in Europe where brothers and nephews inherited the throne. But to be fair, who has his own children and is willing to give this throne to someone else instead of his own children? Of course, Carlo likes his own blood very much and liked to tease him whenever he had time. In addition, Prince Vittorio's full name is Vittorio Amedeo di Savoy. And just as Carlo and the Queen were teasing little Vittorio, Bacona hurried back. I saw him saying with a smile on his face, "Your Majesty, King Carol of Romania has sent an invitation to Princess Mafalda to attend the ball hosted by Prince Ferdinand." What? Chapter 379 Luoyi's kindness. Don't blame Carlo for being so surprised, because this is not a literal invitation to Mafalda to the ball, but a marriage proposal for Prince Ferdinand as usual. The ball is just a cover-up. Faced with the sudden news, Carlo had to return to the office to discuss with Bacona what's going on with Prince Ferdinand. Carlo, who was confused about this, first asked the other party what the situation was. Facing Carlo's inquiry, Bacona had obviously done his homework before and saw him introduce it. Carlo only learned about this basic situation during the introduction by the foreign secretary. Prince Ferdinand was born on August 24, 1865, in Sigmaringen, southwest Germany. Ferdinand's father was Leopold, Prince of Hohenzollern, and his mother was Princess Antonia of Portugal, daughter of Queen Maria II of Portugal and Fernando I. As his father Leopold and brother William declared in 1880 and 1886 respectively that they renounced their right to inherit the Romanian throne, the young Prince Ferdinand became the heir to his childless uncle, King Carlo of Romania. Presumptive heir. The reason why Prince Ferdinand delayed getting married until he was 31 years old was because he maintained a close relationship with Elena Vocarescu, a maid in the palace. As his aunt, Queen Elizabeth knew about this, but she still encouraged the two to date. According to the 1866 Romanian constitution, the presumptive heir to the Romanian throne is prohibited from marrying a Romanian citizen. In 1891, the affair triggered a dynastic crisis, and Queen Elizabeth and Elena were exiled to Neuwied and Paris respectively. Such a blow made Prince Ferdinand somewhat resistant to emotional matters. In addition, Bulgaria took over a large area of Macedonia in one fell swoop at that time, making the situation in the Balkans somewhat unpredictable, so the marriage of Prince Ferdinand will also be far away. This marriage proposal to Italy must also be the result of Romania's careful consideration. In fact, Romania is relatively unique in the Balkans in terms of language and writing. Unlike other countries, Romanian language and writing belong to the Latin family. Grammar and colloquialism are very similar to Italy, but it retains some Latin words lost to other Romance languages. Of course, just being similar in language and writing will not bring about major exchanges between the two countries. In fact, in the Balkan Peninsula, apart from Bulgaria, Romania is the most friendly country to Italy. Of course, this is not just based on similar languages and characters, but is caused by the economic and trade exchanges between the two countries. Needless to say, Romania's food exports are very strong due to the fertile floodplains of the lower Danube River. It is the second largest grain exporter in Europe, second only to Russia. Of course, in addition to grain, Romania also produces oil and gold. Yes, Romania is also the second largest gold producer in Europe, producing nearly 20 tons of gold every year. As for oil, it goes without saying, Europe is the second largest oil exporter, and was the largest oil exporter before the development of Baku. Such rich output created trade between Italy and Romania. Italy is Romania's largest food importer and second largest oil importer. After the oil exploration in Balikpapan, it has been reduced to fourth place. Romania not only exports, but also imports a lot. Although Italian industrial products cannot compete with those of other countries in terms of quality, the lowest prices have made many cash-strapped Romanians take out their wallets. In addition, in view of the performance of the Italian army in recent years, Romania has also purchased a lot of Italian ordnance. Of course, this has a lot to do with the low price of Italian arms. Italy is currently Romania's third largest import and export country, and trade between the two countries reached 34.91 million lire last year. Of course, the cultural and economic exchanges between the two countries cannot be proof that the relationship between the two countries is destined to be good. What Romania values is Italy's influence in the Balkans. In particular, Italy's territory in the Balkans is not far from Romania. It is only separated by one country, so it can be regarded as Romania's neighbor. As we all know, Romania's independence depended on the 10th Russo-Turkish War. However, after Romania became independent, it was very afraid of Russia. It was afraid that Russia would annex it. For this reason, it had a close relationship with Austria-Hungary. Of course, the tigers in the east want to eat people, and the tigers in the west are not bad either. Soon Romania will feel the penetration from Austria-Hungary. For this reason, finding a friend who can help has become an urgent need for Romanians. Coincidentally, the Italian-Turkish War allowed him to see the strength of Italy, and he also obtained Albania from the Ottoman Empire. This naturally makes Romania place its hopes on Italy, and its own prince happens to not be married yet. This can be regarded as asking for advice. Facing this invitation from Romania, Carlo looked at the foreign minister in front of him and asked, "Bicona, what do you think, Your Majesty?" "I think we cannot refuse Romania's invitation. Strengthening our ties with Romania will bring no harm to our country." Having said this, Bicona continued enthusiastically, "First of all, our influence in the Balkans has waned over the years as countries continue to exert influence. There are reasons why." Bicona said this. First of all, Bulgaria, which has the best relationship with Italy in the Balkans, has no longer been so close to Italy in the past 2 years. According to the news they received, Bulgaria's relations with Russia are slowly recovering, and its relations with Greece are also improving. Of course, this is understandable. Bulgaria is obsessed with the remaining half of Macedonia, and even Constantinople is not without ideas. Italy has no way to support it in this regard. Italy can no longer expand in the Balkans, otherwise it will attract dissatisfaction or even excessive behavior from Austria-Hungary and Russia. Russia is doing better, but Austria-Hungary is not. The alliance of three emperors is still the cornerstone of Italian diplomacy, so any diplomatic strategy that affects it needs to be thought through twice. In addition, having good relations with Romania is also very beneficial to our country. As he spoke, he drew a line on the map from Albania in Italy to Bulgaria and Romania, which made Carlo's eyes light up. So, our country must accept Romania's goodwill, pretty much. I can't think of a reason not to accept it. There seems to be something missing from the discussion between these two people. Didn't they ask the person involved, Princess Mafalda, if she was willing? Sorry, as a princess of a country, you basically have no right to choose freely. That's right. The marriage of princesses and mortals in movies is simply a lie. Princesses and princes are the reality. Regardless of whether the princess loves the prince or not, she must accept it. This is one of the reasons why the European royal family has so many lovers. Two strangers were forced together for the benefit of the country. They are all princesses and princes held in the palm of their hands. It is strange how good their relationship can be. However, the fact that they have received good clothing, good food, good education and other benefits since childhood has determined that the fate of their future wedding is rarely directly determined. After the two reached an agreement, Carlo informed Princess Mafalda of the result. To his sister, he could only say sorry. Of course, for Romania, it was natural to be ecstatic after receiving Italy's reply. A grand ball was immediately prepared for the arrival of the Italian princess after Christmas. Carlo's youngest sister, Princess Mafalda, boarded a cruise ship to Romania, led by Carlo's brother Emanuel. Chapter 380. The first flight. Flying has been a dream of mankind since ancient times. In ancient times, our ancestors dreamed of flying into the sky like a bird. Therefore, angels with wings and gods flying in the clouds and mist also appear in people's fantasies. The sages knew that you can't achieve anything by fantasy alone. You need to work hard on your own. So there are people who flap their wings and try to imitate the flight of birds. Of course, since the Renaissance, people have also known that flying cannot be achieved by relying on human power and must rely on machines. So Leonardo da Vinci had a draft of the aircraft design, and then people tried to figure it out from the machine. Of course, the emergence of the internal combustion engine gave people who wanted to fly into the sky a better choice. The small town of Pavia, located southwest of Milan, lives a good life relying on the bustling city of Milan. The residents in the town like to grow vegetables and fruits and sell them in Milan, living a happy and comfortable life. But today, the town of Pavia was very lively. Everyone happily went to a wasteland in the southwest of the town because someone was working on an aircraft here. That's right, it's a machine that can fly. It's such a rare thing that makes everyone rush over. There were probably as many as 1,000 people around here, and this also shows that people watching is popular everywhere, let alone at the end of the 19th century when entertainment activities were barren. With so many people surrounding them, the pressure on Duilio Sigil and Gerardo Carni was very high. Duilio, didn't you tell me not to be so public? Why do I feel like there are almost 1,000 people here? If this fails in public, how will it end? Don't ask me, how did I know there were so many people today? I just said it casually. This aircraft has been our hard work for many years, so you can't have more confidence. Now it's better to keep an eye on the aircraft and don't let anyone touch it. It wasn't the first time that the two of them had been watched by people while flying, but it was the first time that so many people were watching. There were so many people, and they were afraid of something happening. After the two of them hurriedly drove people around the test flight site, the sharp-eyed Sigil patted his partner on the shoulder. Look, the reporter from Milan Daily is here. Let's go up to him. Blake, looked at the huge flying machine in front of him and felt lucky. This time the headline should be mine. Fortunately, he listened to the advice of his friend Jill and came to see if this was really worth the 6 lire of carriage money. Thinking of this, Blake raised the camera in his hand and took a few pictures of the flying machine. "Hello, are you Blake?" reporter from Milan Daily News. A voice pulled Blake, who had been immersed in taking pictures, back. "Yes, I am." Blake looked at Sigil and Carney, who appeared in front of him. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Duilio Sigil. Next to me is my partner Gerardo Carney. The aircraft you photographed was made by us." Faced with Sigil's introduction, Blake immediately understood. He quickly took out a paper and pen and spoke. "Hello, Mr. Sigil and Mr. Carney. I'm sorry, I was just shocked by the aircraft you two built. Now can you tell me about the process of making this aircraft?" Facing Blake's question, the two looked at each other before Sigil spoke. "No problem, it's a long story." In Sigil's account, he, the youngest son of a lord, had a fantasy about flying since he was a child. Later, he even read Otto Lilienthal's concept drawings of aircraft and never forgot about flying. Later, when he was studying at the University of Milan, he met a like-minded partner, Connie, the son of a construction engineer. The next thing is simple. Two people who both want to fly will naturally start pursuing their dreams after graduation. The pair's first funding came from Sigil's father, Lord Sigil Sr. The old lord invested 50,000 lire in his son's dream, and they later raised another 30,000 lire from others with this funding. The two began their dream of flying. They started with flying models and built 3 flying models and a glider in the first year. Then he used the natural wind outlet of the Como Pass to experiment with his own flight model and glider and collected a lot of data point. Then the next year, the two developed 2 gliders and tested them with different wings. In the experiment, they corrected some erroneous flight data and designed a wing cross-section shape with greater lift point. By the 3rd year, the two began to develop a real aircraft, Pioneer 1. The aircraft is 6.17 meters long, has a wingspan of 6.78 meters, and is equipped with a 12 horsepower gasoline engine. Unfortunately, this aircraft, which represented the two people's hard work, had a bad start and did not fly at all point. Although Pioneer 1 failed to succeed, the two men did not give up at all. First they looked for the reason, and after some searching, the two believed that the lift was insufficient. Faced with this reason, they chose to expand the wingspan. Compared with the 15.51 square meters of Pioneer 1, the wingspan of the new Pioneer 2 increased by 1.5 times to 41.17 square meters. Of course, just increasing the wingspan is not enough. The two also made major changes to Pioneer 2. So Pioneer 2 is very different from Pioneer 1. Now Pioneer 2 is 6.94 meters long, with a wingspan of 13.3 meters and a height of 2.95 meters. It has a double-layer wing and is equipped with a 15.6 horsepower 4-cylinder water-cooled gasoline engine. Reporter Blake kept taking notes on Sigil's story and asked questions from time to time. Faced with these questions, Sigil also answered them one by one, and the conversation between the two was very harmonious. "Hope you guys are successful." After asking the questions, reporter Blake gave his blessing. "Thanks." At this moment, reporter Blake suddenly asked, "By the way, can I ask, who is flying this flying machine today?" "It's me," Sigil answered. "To ensure a successful flight, I dropped to 102 pounds. Well, this is indeed a warrior who works hard for his dream of flying. He can lose so much weight for himself." He thought he was already so thin. Seeing this, reporter Blake picked up the camera again and said, "Can I take a picture of you? Stand next to the machine and take a picture." "No problem," snapped, with a flash of fluorescent pink, the famous photo of the tall and lanky seagull standing next to Pioneer 2, wrapped in a windbreaker, became point later. Sigil was lying on the Pioneer wearing a fur hat. Yes, he was lying on his stomach. In order to make the flight successful, even Sigil lost weight. "What is the seat?" Then Carney started the engine, and there was a roar of the gasoline engine, and the propellers on both sides of the nose began to rotate rapidly. 4 more people pushed up from the wings To give the Pioneer better acceleration point with help from others, the Pioneer's speed became faster and faster, and soon everyone felt a lightness in their hands, and at the same time a burst of cheers rang out from the surrounding onlookers. Pioneer 2's guide wheel left the ground. It's flying. Blake's camera snapped, recording such a great moment. With the help of machinery, mankind finally left the ground and made its first flight, and Sigil became the first human pilot. The test flight of the two people in Pavia was very successful. Pioneer 2 flew in the air 3 times in total. The longest flight lasted 1 minute and 49 seconds and flew a distance of 389 meters on the same day. Milan Daily reported this grand flight with a front page headline. Sorry, it's late. This is number 9 chapter 381 interview. Sigil and Carne's flight experiment launched the two people around the world. After being first reported by Diario di Milano, other Italian newspapers soon followed suit. Later, newspapers in other countries also introduced this news. After all, it was the first time that humans relied on mechanical power to fly. This cannot be overemphasized. Therefore, under the reports of major newspapers around the world, the two people quickly became famous. After becoming famous, their actions have attracted more and more attention. For example, during an air show in Venice, more than 40,000 people watched their flight. And after seeing Pioneer 2 take off, cheers filled the sky. In just 1 month, Sigil and Carne performed 4 flight demonstrations. The continuous performances made the two more famous. Of course, the flight was not always smooth. The 4th flight was very unsatisfactory, and the engine suddenly stopped in the air. Pioneer 2 fell directly. Fortunately, the height was only 4 or 5 meters, so Sigil only injured his leg. And Sigil also achieved another achievement, the first air crash, and the first person injured in an air crash. Of course, Sigil and Pioneer 2 also reminded others who were eager to try it out that there were huge risks in flying. However, Sigil's plane crash did not affect their reputation. Many newspapers even called their accident the inevitable price to pay for challenging the sky. Does it feel a little familiar? A familiar smell in it? Yes, Italy is deliberately turning the two into heroes. National heroes who conquer the sky. Yes, in this era of rampant nationalism, 2 Italian athletes completed their conquest of the sky for the first time. This sounds so pleasant and beautiful to the ears. They also proved the brave and enterprising spirit of Italian men. So why should others not be proud of it? Yes, in this era, fanatical nationalism is commonplace in all countries, and is even something that is encouraged. Therefore, how to improve the national self-confidence of the people depends on the government and public opinion. The performance of Sigil and Carne is quite positive for the government, so it was erected. Of course, performance in front of the people is not enough. As the monarch of Italy, Carlo cannot turn a blind eye to these 2 Italian heroes. Not long after Carlo met the 2 flying pioneers in the Quirinal Palace. Welcome. The 2 flying heroes, seeing Sigil and Carne being led in by the waiter, Carlo stepped forward and welcomed them with a smile on his face. Hello, Your Majesty. Facing the reception of Lord Carlo, the two of them looked frightened. For them, the reception of King Carlo was definitely one of the most proud things. Both of you, please take a seat. Carlo could tell that the two of them were a little nervous, so he tried to calm their nerves. Can you tell me about your flight? I'm very interested. Faced with the topic proposed by the monarch, the two of them would certainly not refuse. Okay, Your Majesty. Later, during the brief narration, Carlo learned some things that were not in the report. You saying that you invited reporters and even made the test flight public because you ran out of money? Yes, Your Majesty. Of course, Carne and I only have 34 liras in our bodies. If the flight fails, we won't even have the money to pull the aircraft back. What we thought at the time was that if it succeeds, nothing can be said, but if it fails, I also plan to give 30 lire of it to the reporter, so that when writing reports, they will describe us as more tragic characters. Is this to consider raising funds after failure? Yes, Your Majesty. The biggest problem for us, and many like-minded people who dream of flying, is funding. Because it is very expensive to fly. Many people have been asking for funding for many years, but it is not enough to cover the cost of a flight experiment. Like us, this kind of people can be said to be rich. Of course, this is also related to the fact that we know more people. Of course, Carlo understood what he meant. Flight experiments require a lot of funds to clear the way, and most people who dream of flight experiments will be blocked by funds. Being able to conduct flight experiments is already ahead of a large number of people. As for being successful after several flight experiments, this is basically a manifestation of financial resources and other aspects, and of course luck. No, you are very lucky. Facing the words of Lord Carlo, the two smiled slightly. Yes, Your Majesty, we are indeed very lucky. At this time, I saw an attendant walking over carrying a box. Carlo smiled and said to the two of them, Sigil, Connie, in view of your outstanding performance in aviation, now, on behalf of the Kingdom of Italy, I award 2 Knights of the Order of the Crown, 2nd class. Carlo's words made the two of them stand upright quickly. Of course they know about this medal, which can only be obtained by making outstanding contributions to the Kingdom of Italy. Since its establishment, only more than 30 people have received it, and they are basically all highly respected people. How can these two people win such a precious medal? But after seeing that Carlo had already picked up the medal, how could they refuse? This is a great honor. After Carlo put it on for the two of them, he asked casually, by the way, what are you going to do next? Faced with Carlo's question, the two immediately answered, Your Majesty, we want to continue the flight experiment. Of course, there's no problem with that. I just wanted to ask what your requirements are for flying next. Carlo's words made the two of them not sure how to answer. During this period, various honors came one after another, and both of them felt a little confused and hadn't considered this issue. Yet faced with the dilemma between the two, Carlo continued, If not, how about I make a request for you? Faced with Carlo's proposal, who would not think of rejecting it? The two of them nodded repeatedly. No problem, Your Majesty, please raise it. The new aircraft needs to fly higher, farther, and stay in the air longer. Well, Carlo's words won't be out of date in 100 years, let alone now. After hearing Carlo's words, Sigil and Connie's eyes lit up. Your Majesty, this goal is very much in line with our requirements. New aircraft in the future will inevitably fly higher and farther, and stay in the air longer. Faced with the two people's guarantees, Carlo certainly would not be stingy. I admire their courage very much, so I will let the Royal Fund invest in their flight experiments, with an annual fund of 300,000 liras. I believe it can be a small help. Well, Carlo's investment pleased the pair, although now that they were famous, they no longer lacked funds. But there are different types of funds. With the king's investment, they can avoid a lot of trouble. Perhaps after returning, Pioneer 3 needs to be considered. Chapter 382, Italy's industrialization problems. In the spring of 1897, although the aviation craze started by Sigil and Connie was rising, this was after all a game for the rich. For the poor people, they still need to pay more attention to their own lives. Just take a look at a high-level sport like aviation. According to a survey by the Italian government, Italy currently has 3.74 million workers, nearly 3 times more than the 1.29 million workers 10 years ago. This fully illustrates the development and growth of Italian industry in these 10 years. However, although the size of Italian workers is growing, the increase in wages of Italian workers is far from satisfactory. Taking the textile industry, which currently has the largest number of workers in Italy, as an example, a skilled male textile worker's monthly salary is 140 to 160 lire, while that of a female worker is 110 to 130 lire. As for child labor, due to the promotion of caring people, the Italian government strictly prohibits the recruitment of minors under the age of 16. Otherwise a fine of 200,000 to 1 million lire will be imposed. 200,000 lire for one child labor, with a maximum of 5 caps, so no factory in Italy dares to use of child labor. In terms of wages, the wages of Italian workers are twice as low as those of British textile workers, and about 75% lower than those of neighboring France. There is no way. Italy is a late developing industrial country, so it can only use low prices as weapons. to find a place for its own products of course. As a factory worker, your salary is definitely lower than in surrounding countries. Well, there is actually another reason. That is, Italy has a large number of unemployed people, and workers do not dare to ask for too much point, because Italian agriculture is also undergoing capitalization. From 1870 onwards in northern Italy, capitalized large farms gradually became dominant in the northern regions. In these large farms, hired workers were engaged in production work, large-scale drainage and irrigation projects were built, new technologies and chemical fertilizers were adopted, and the specialization of agricultural production was strengthened. As a result, total agricultural production in the north is now twice as high as it was in 1870. In central and southern Italy, capitalized large farms also developed and expanded in the two places starting from 1880 and 1885 respectively. In the center, large farms already dominate, but in the south it is also accelerating, and within 5 years it is expected that large farms in southern Italy will also dominate. The implementation of capitalized large farms has brought huge changes to the development of Italian agriculture. Italian agricultural products have increased by 64% since unification, and most of the credit comes from the promotion of capitalized large farms. Of course, this also brings a side effect, that is, large farms do not require too many employees to operate. Large farms with more production materials only need half of the employees to complete the planting volume, and this has also led to the influx of a large number of landless farmers. City. The large influx of farmers will also impose a considerable burden on cities. Of course, it will have a huge impact on workers and industry. A large number of laborers entered the city, accelerating Italy's industrialization. Of course, the most critical factor was the Italian government's continuous opening of vast markets. Italy's own domestic demand simply cannot support its industrialization process. In fact, Italian industry has not absorbed all the labor force flowing into the cities. Here we have to mention the two reservoirs prepared by the Italian government for this purpose, Albania and Libya. Although there was a lot of uproar in the city at that time, because of the relocation of all the indigenous people in these two areas, it also freed up a flood discharge pond for Italy. The two places accommodated a total of 1 million people, and solved a lot of troubles for Italy. Of course, East Africa and Borneo also absorbed part of it. Therefore, during this period, Italy's foreign immigration, non-colonial immigrants, did not increase much, from nearly 100,000 per year to about 120,000. Of course, including colonial immigrants, Italy's annual immigration is about 200,000, which is also not low. To some extent, the colonies also served as a demographic catharsis. However, at this time, the population growth rate in various Italian cities was not small. Take Milan as an example. In 10 years, Milan's population has grown from 330,000 to 490,000 now, which is a significant increase. In addition, Turin has also increased from 250,000 to the current 330,000. In addition, as the third largest city in Italy, Rome's population is also growing rapidly, from 300,000 to the current 460,000. The south is also good, with Palermo growing from 240,000 to 340,000 and Naples from 410,000 to 490,000. The growth of urban population is also the result of economic growth. Of course, the economy drives population growth equally well. The current birth rate in Italy is 31.8, the death rate is 19.7, and the natural growth rate is 12.1. However, considering that there are currently about 200,000 immigrants every year, the current annual population growth rate is not large. It fluctuates around 200,000. However, the growth of Italy's local population is actually determined by industrialization. Industry cannot accommodate the excess population, which will naturally lead to the loss of population. However, it is currently very difficult for Italy to allow industry to further accommodate more people. Because of the market developed by Italy, the exploitability is about to bottom out. At present, the overseas markets for Italian industrial products are mainly concentrated in the Far East, the Borneo colonies and the Balkan Peninsula. People in Western Europe have higher living standards, and Italy's price advantage is not easy to use because of high tariffs. Among them, the scale of the Far East market in Italy has almost been developed to the extreme, and it is no longer possible to continue to grow significantly. Of course, Italy has potential to be tapped as a transit trader, such as the trade of raw silk, tung oil, bristle and other Far Eastern specialties. However, these cannot solve the problem of Italian industrial products at this time. Italian industry needs to transform, and Rome also understands that the Italian economy has gradually transformed from an extensive economic growth model to an intensive economic growth model. Of course, this is easier said than done. However, for Italy, this matter must be done, and the sky will be brighter if it goes further, allowing Italian industrialization to embark on a broad road. Taking a step back, this is falling into a trap, leaving Italian industry to fall into internal friction. In this regard, knowledgeable people in Italy also see it. For example, Pareto, a famous Italian economist, pointed out that if the current pace of Italian industrial development is to be improved, important enterprises must be selected for support. This Pareto is the proposer of the 28 theory, because this person believes that important factors usually account for only a minority, while unimportant factors often account for the majority. Therefore, we only need to control an important few to control the overall situation, which is reflected in the quantity ratio, which is roughly 2:8. Does it feel a little familiar? Yes, this is the monopoly stage of the capital economy. The economist is advocating the benefits of monopoly to Italy's economic development, and he is right. Monopoly does promote the Italian economy, but monopoly also brings harm. Who can turn a blind eye? Chapter 383 National Progressive Party, Part 1. Of course, Italy's economic problems are not urgent yet, and its economic development potential has not yet been exhausted. Of course, Italy's economic development in recent years has also brought benefits to people at all levels, especially under the encouragement of the government and public opinion. Nationalism has penetrated deeply into all parts of Italy. Of course, nationalism is generally good, as it enhances national cohesion and patriotism. However, nationalism is not all good. There are also categories of rational and moderate nationalism and intolerant and radical nationalism. In any country, there are two major categories of nationalists. Moreover, the difference between the two is sometimes blurred, and it is very easy to confuse them. Moreover, radical nationalism, from a certain perspective, is more inspiring, which in turn will make more people agree with it. Therefore, in Italy, there are many people with radical national views. Especially in recent years, Italy has performed very well, with outstanding performance in war, diplomacy, etc. This has further allowed the radical nationalists to develop and grow. Of course, radical nationalists in various regions are not willing to have their influence limited here, so connection and even alliance have become necessary. In Florence, a radical nationalist meeting was taking place. In the conference hall of the Gimenez Hotel in the west of Florence, 294 nationalists are gathering together to speak freely for a common goal. Everyone, I think that our country's territory is smaller than that of France, Germany, and Austria-Hungary, let alone its arable land. Except for the Po River plain, our country is basically hilly, and the arable land is far smaller in terms of area and output. They are lagging behind, and because our country's population focuses on family, its fertility rate is high, and there will be 400,000 more people every year. Ladies and gentlemen, this annual increase in population has far exceeded the capacity of our country's territory, so every year 200,000 Italians have to cross the ocean to seek life elsewhere. This happens every year, and as qualified patriots, we cannot ignore it. Therefore, I believe that the current population overflow situation in Italy is due to the lack of territory in our country. For example, Tunisia, which is separated by a sea from our country, was originally the land that our country was the first to develop. The French took this area by violence, causing our country to lose this area. You must know that Tunisia is a very suitable region. It has 5 million hectares of arable land, and can accommodate at least 4 million Chinese citizens. When Udo Cruz said this, he extended 4 fingers to make a gesture. As expected, his words caused the biggest commotion in the venue so far. Those present were all people who considered themselves to be the most patriotic. Of course, they also knew some of the actual situation in Italy. It was really rare to find an area that accommodated at least 4 million people, even in North Africa. Udo Cruz then continued. In addition to Tunisia, our Italians, such as Savoy, Nice, Tyrol, Malta, Trieste, Dalmatia, and Corsica, are all Italian-speaking people of Italian origin, and these people are all eager to return to the big family of the Kingdom of Italy. We have the responsibility and obligation to bring them back to the kingdom, even if it means sacrificing their lives. Every time Udo Cruz mentioned a place name, he was greeted with cheers, as if these mentioned places had become a part of Italy. No one feels there is anything wrong with this, and as for whether the locals are eager to return to Italy, that is a must. If he does not want to return to the Italian family, then this person must have moved from other places and pretended to be another ethnic group, and he is destined to go back to where he belongs in the future. After the cheers died down, Cruz continued, of course, our future is bright, but the road is destined to be tortuous. These areas are still under the rule of other countries, so we need to create favorable conditions for the kingdom, so that it can complete the control of the above areas at a smaller cost. Capture. In these areas, we also need to respond flexibly according to the situation. Although we want the above areas to return, we cannot let the kingdom have enemies on all sides, so the choice is very important. Of course, all this requires us to use our political power to influence the government. So I appeal to like-minded friends here, we must unite. We need to let the people see our voice, let them be attracted by our lofty goals. For this we need our own newspapers and our own organizations. We should let the world seize the power of Italy. Udo Cruz's words brought the conference to a climax. Everyone present expressed their views on the formation of a political force. Basically, everyone is willing to see it, because it can make their voices heard by more people. As for Cruz, he retreated to the back to rest for a while. Udo, your performance is perfect. I believe that you are destined to have a place in the new political party. The person who spoke was one of the financial sponsors of this meeting, Bertie Levenel, a grain processing businessman from Florence. In the face of his financial backers, Cruz was very polite. Thank you Mr. Levenel for this generous donation. Otherwise this meeting would not have been held in Florence. Udo, I think your performance can become one of the leaders. I think that I can provide some funding at that time. 500,000 lire should be enough to build a newspaper. Mr. Levenel, you spent money this time. On behalf of other patriots, I thank you for your help. We will never forget our true friends. There is no need for a heavy hammer to sound the drum, and Cruz certainly knew what the other party was up to this time. However, since you want to become a political organization, you must consider some practical issues. Enthusiasm alone can't accomplish anything. Including gathering everyone together this time. The cost is not light at all. Mr. Cruz, it's your turn. The assistant who was responsible for keeping an eye on the venue immediately urged him. With a smile on his face, Cruz walked back to the front desk. Everyone, regarding the issue of forming a political organization, I want you to listen to my opinion first. On February 17, 1897, the nationalists held a congress in Florence, and a new political party was born. The National Progressive Party was born under the witness of 294 nationalists. The highest decision-making level of the National Progressive Party is the Executive Committee, which has 7 members, one of whom is the Secretary General of the Executive Committee, and is responsible for some daily work. Udo Cruz became the first Secretary General of the Executive Committee. Of course, the first major event of the National Progressive Party after its establishment was to create its own mouthpiece, the Italian Weekly. In order to show that the National Progressive Party achieved a blockbuster effect at the same time, Cruz personally wrote the manuscript for the first issue. In the weekly newspaper, the National Progressive Party published its own right-wing rhetoric. They believe that war is a force that revitalizes a social body, and that the progress of the entire human race depends on war. The war not only revived and revolutionized life in the conquered lands, it also helped to resolve Italy's internal difficulties by providing a way out for its surplus inhabitants and opening the way to economic expansion. In addition, the National Progressive Party also issued its most controversial proposal. They advocated the establishment of a union including Trieste, Dalmatia, Tunisia, Libya, Albania, Savoy, Nice, Malta and Corsica. The new empire of Greater Italy, including all regions within this empire. There should be no other culture than that of Italy. Moreover, they pointed out that the Italian nation's foreign aggression and expansion was just and reasonable. The Italian nation must have its own war. Without its own war, the Italian nation can only play the role of a clay pot next to an iron pot. In addition, in line with the proposition of foreign aggression and expansion, the nationalists' program also has their own domestic policies and principles. The main contents are: citizens' freedom, democracy, socialism, and bourgeois liberalism must be the basis for internal governance. The enemy must establish a complete administrative power. Every citizen of the kingdom must play a role and work for the Kingdom of Italy. Only when the country is strong can citizens enjoy more benefits. Chapter 384, Progressive Party, Part 2. The National Promotion Party's remarks in the Italian weekly newspaper are more like a combat document, and its far-right ideology is fully exposed. Maybe it's not like exposure, but a deliberate display, to attract people who feel the same way. Point of course, no matter what, the goal of the National Promotion Party has been achieved, and its reputation has spread throughout Italy. The reputation of the National Promotion Party can spread throughout Italy in a short period of time, but it cannot be achieved by propagating ideas and excessive territorial concepts. In fact, more importantly, in the current Italian political environment, the National Promotion Party is like a White House. The pool of ink on the paper is so eye-catching. Since 1876, the Italian political environment has been on the left, and left-wing parties have held government power for the past 2 decades. Right-wing parties already hold only 1/3 of the seats in parliament. Right-wing political parties have been in a really difficult situation in recent years, and no new right-wing political parties have been established for a long time. Influential political parties do not count as having dozens of people playing house. Therefore, the emergence of the National Promotion Party, which is a right-wing radical, is really like a bolt from the blue. Of course, after being surprised, the left-wing parties would not be polite when they reacted. Politics is a zero-sum game in which, if you take one more bite, I will take one less bite. The left-wing parties don't even have enough to eat, and they want to steal the right-wing's food. Now you have a new right-wing party popping up. Then there is nothing more to say. If you are from a left-wing party, go ahead and let the newly minted Nationality Promotion Party learn about politics and know the rules. Therefore, the National Promotion Party became popular, and it was criticized by all the major left-wing parties. Today the Socialist Party stands up to denounce. Tomorrow the Democratic Party comes out to criticize, and the left-wing parties that do not respect martial ethics take turns taking turns, trying to make this new National Promotion Party look bad, and make everyone wrinkle their noses whenever they hear the name of their party. Therefore, the new National Promotion Party is facing a stormy moment, with accusations from big figures from all walks of life. This is the biggest test for the leaders of the National Promotion Party headed by Udo Cruz inside the headquarters on Col Simon in Florence. Cruz is busy. Ask Gail how the talks are going. We need to fight back. We can't just rely on our own weekly newspaper. We must have the help of other newspapers. Also tell him, don't care too much about money. The primary focus now should be on voice, and we lack the media to help us speak out. Okay. Secretary General, I'll ask him how the discussion went. Hurry, we don't have much time to waste. Udo. Cruz was wearing trousers with suspenders and a white shirt, and was giving orders like a commander in the office. Luke, you sent a telegram to tell Anil that the Venice he is responsible for must hold a parade on the 12th. We cannot let other regions wait for him because of his delay, otherwise we will need to carefully consider him next time. Is the position suitable for you? Remember, tell him what I said verbatim. Okay, Secretary General, I will send a telegram right away. Davidson, please send this manuscript to the weekly newspaper in person immediately. I need to see it published tomorrow. I'll go right away. Holding the manuscript written by Cruz himself, Davidson went out like a gust of wind. After allocating several things, Cruz picked up a glass of water to soothe his thirsty throat. To be honest, before the establishment of the National Promotion Party, Cruz had considered that their party might not be popular. but he had never thought of the current scene of a group attack. Point of course, in Kruz's view, this is also a test for their democratic promotion party, and they must survive no matter what. No matter what tricks these left-wing parties use, he and his like-minded friends have nothing to fear. Come on, whatever moves you have, just show them out. Kruz, who is cheering himself up internally, is still ambitious for this fight. This massive siege by the left is also beneficial to the National Promotion Party. Although this act of putting them at the forefront is dangerous, it does not bring much exposure. Point. As long as you can withstand the siege from the left, you will naturally be impressive, and you will be able to gain a foothold in Italian politics. Anyone who can survive such a political siege, and survive, will have this confidence. Secretary General, Kruz's thoughts were interrupted by a voice. The man who ran in a hurry seemed to have found his savior when he saw him. What's the matter? Kruz knew the man who was sent out to raise funds with Nordland. He seemed to be named Hobbs. Mr. Kruz, Nordland sent me back to inform you that there is a problem in raising funds. Many sponsors who have promised to provide funds have not fulfilled their promises. As soon as he heard that the funds were in trouble, Kruz stepped forward and grabbed the other person. How much money can be raised now? According to Mr. Nordland's estimate, it is about 400,000 lire, but more than 500,000 lire. Why so little? Don't blame Kruz for being short of money. Funds for this propaganda war are very important. Without funds, this propaganda war that costs money like water will not last for more than a few days. In fact, there was no need to guess. Kruz knew that someone must be up to something. Sure enough, according to Hobbs, a patron who was unwilling to donate anymore privately revealed that the commotion this time caused a lot of pressure on them. There is also news that some high-ranking government officials have a bad opinion of the National Promotion Party, so they must suppress the sponsors who facilitate them in other ways. Although this news has not been confirmed, since it has spread, it has to make people worried, so some people are unwilling. Kruz felt very angry after hearing Hobbs' explanation. These damn guys actually used such despicable methods. It's normal for Kruz to feel angry. The enemy used unexpected tactics to deal with them. This makes people feel aggrieved. What's more important is that they can't say this trick yet. They can only hold it in. No, I have to find a way to counterattack. We cannot accept such a heartwarming out of game move. Kruz, whose head was spinning rapidly, was thinking about a solution. Carlo looked at today's newspaper and asked the captain of the guard beside him, Macron, are there really tens of thousands of National Promotion Party members gathered in Piazza Navona today? Facing Carlo's question, Captain Macron immediately answered, Your Majesty, according to our understanding, there must be more than 10,000 people. As for the purpose of the National Promotion Party, Carlo did not ask, because he knew that these new right-wingers were protesting against being bullied by the left. Yes, in this era, the Italian right wing is really miserable, but that has nothing to do with Carlo. Carlo asked, just because he was interested and asked a few questions. Don't expect Carlo to uphold justice for them. There is no justice in politics. Only if the new National Promotion Party can withstand this wave will it be accepted by other political parties, and also by Carlo. This is politics. Being weak is the original sin and no one will sympathize with you. Of course, Carlo had little energy to pay attention to the new National Promotion Party because there was a more important thing that concerned his heart. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 Garibaldi Class Launch. As one of the most technologically advanced shipyards in Italy, the Venice Naval Shipyard covers an area of 46 hectares, has 9 docks and more than 4,000 skilled workers. Although there are not many docks in Venice, they are very technological, and most of the various equipment are the latest. The Venice shipyard is currently very busy, and there are many busy figures on the dock. Among them, 2 warships have almost been built and are just waiting to be launched into the water and outfitted. These 2 battleships look very distinctive. The Gundam's battleship is too simple and has an obsessive compulsive central axis layout, both of which tell you that this is an Italian battleship. Of course, the powerful 2 main guns at the front and 2 at the back will tell you how powerful the firepower is. The most obvious signs are the command tower and the wide chimney behind the rail. This kind of layout that combines several flues is currently only found in Italy. Doing this, Admiral Cervera, please look at this. This is the command tower of the Columbus. Its ring-shaped design is very convenient for observing the surrounding conditions. In addition, the command tower's maximum 200mm thick armor can also withstand enemy fire attacks. On an unfinished warship, Cuniberti, the chief designer of the Venice Naval Shipyard, was introducing the warship at his feet to a group of naval officials. Wait, the Columbus that Cuniberti called just now? Yes, this ship is indeed called Columbus. Together with the Francisco No. 2 in Dockyard 2 next door, it forms the new core of the Spanish Navy. Yes, these are the exact words of Admiral Cervera, the Spanish Minister of Navy, said at the simple welcome ceremony just now. Admiral Cervera came here mainly for the launching ceremony of the Columbus. The Columbus, which has been under construction for 16 months, will be launched soon. For these 2 brand new and powerful warships, the Spanish Navy cannot pay too much attention to them when looking at the garbage they are still serving. One more thing, these 2 warships are also the first time that Spain has warships of more than 10,000 tons, and they have strong historical and commemorative significance. Look, everyone, this is the battleship's firing control room. Above the command tower, in a semi-developed pendant-style building, Cuniberti was introducing the Spanish officers with puzzled faces. Fire control room. Yes, this is a command room set up to coordinate artillery firing. Because these 2 warships have 8 main guns, the firing frequency must be coordinated. I don't think I need to remind you of the power of the salvo, right? Cuniberti's last words made the Spanish officer who asked the question blush from ear to ear. Admiral Cervera saw it in his eyes, and an idea in his heart was confirmed. And Cuniberti continued to introduce. Because of our experience in previous naval battles, in addition to designing the firing control room to be semi-open, the 40x large-scale low-light telescope on the lookout post on the top of the rail pole can accurately observe objects 25 nautical miles away, such as the opponent is a warship or a merchant ship. Everyone, please look. This is. Later, Cuniberti took Admiral Cervera and his party to visit the power room, sailor's restroom, dining room, captain's room and other facilities. The Spanish side, listening to Cuniberti's introduction, kept taking notes in a daze. Even Admiral Cervera took notes from time to time to write down important information. This visit lasted from morning to evening, and even lunch was eaten on the boat with bread. After disembarking from the ship, Admiral Cervera and his party took a short rest. It was indeed tiring to wander around the ship. Colonel Martin Vargas, Colonel Sirio Valent, you 2 stay, everyone else should disperse. After taking a short rest, Admiral Cervera immediately called out the names of 2 of the officers in the envious eyes of others. The 2 colonels stood in front of General Cervera. Before these 2 people could speak, Admiral Cervera spoke first. How do you feel today? Very good. This is a powerful battleship. Yes, it is very powerful. At least there is nothing in the world that can compete with it. The 2 people's answers were not echoed by Admiral Cervera, who only spoke. Since these 2 battleships are currently the best in the world, you should also know why we spent a lot of money to buy them. Yes, Cuba and the Philippines are not at peace, and some people are peeking at the Spanish colonies. Facing the 2 people's answers, Admiral Cervera was very pleased. You are right, that's why the kingdom spent a lot of money to purchase these 2 warships. And you were carefully selected by me from the kingdom's navy, so you need to take on the heavy responsibility of commanding 2 warships. Are you ready? Ready. The energetic and unanimous answers made Admiral Cervera nod with satisfaction. Very good. Next, you will work with your subordinate officers and soldiers to get familiar with these 2 battleships. Go down. After sending away the 2 excited new captains, Admiral Cervera looked out the window at the brightly lit night scene. Hopefully, it's not too late to Days later, the Venice shipyard was decorated with lights and decorations, and a large number of people gathered in front of the Columbus. Needless to say, today is the day when the most powerful cruise ship in the world is launched. Witnessed by hundreds of naval officers and soldiers from both countries and guests. Admiral Cervera raised a bottle of champagne and smashed it against the bow of the ship. With a crisp bang sound, the champagne was smashed to pieces. Then, driven by the roaring turnaround, the Columbus slid into the sea and stopped steadily next to it after a wave. Then, a burst of cheers sounded, and people cheered for the launch of this huge ship. Admiral Cervera looked at the launching battleship with relief. Admiral Cervera, congratulations on the launch of your battleship. As an Italian representative attending the ceremony, Admiral Iagia, Minister of the Navy, personally came to congratulate him with full sincerity. Thanks. Facing the congratulations from Admiral Iagia, Admiral Cervera would certainly not be rude, not to mention that he happened to have something to ask for. Admiral Iagia, thank you very much for coming. It's nothing. Your two countries have a close relationship. The navies of our two countries should move around more. It should be so. It should be so. At this point, Admiral Cervera had an idea. Admiral Iagia, tell me to move around a lot. I have an idea, and I wonder if we can discuss it. Speaking, it's like this. The officers and soldiers of our navy have not experienced combat at sea for many years, and your country has experienced a lot of combat in recent years. So I would like to ask if your navy can exchange experiences with our navy. If our country's two new warships, it would be best if we could conduct actual combat exercises with your country's warships. Well, Admiral Cervera wants to make the two patrol ships into combat effectiveness as soon as possible, and he plans to ask the Italian Navy for help. However, this task is not easy to help at all. You must know that money is needed for warships to go to sea. The provisions, fuel, and ammunition of all officers and men on the ship need to be consumed. These are not small amounts of money, especially if they must be able to cooperate with two new style patrol warships. Then only Turin class and Venice class. The 5 Darius and the improved class cannot cooperate at all. Just the difference in speed of 8 knots between the two is a big problem. Well, there is no problem in exchanging experiences. As for the joint training of battleships, don't worry, we are willing to cover half of the cost. As expected, people are poor and have short ambitions, so this can only contribute half of it. Faced with Admiral Cervera's stingy behavior, Admiral Iagia's heart moved. No problem, our Italian Navy will not embarrass your country. 3 Turin class ships can be mobilized to cooperate with you. The conversation between the two admirals and even the launching of the Columbus was a major event for the Venice shipyard. Of course, the major event could not stop other work at hand. This is not in the number 3 dock. Most of the Italian Navy's first warship of the same type has been built. Several shipyard workers have just painted the ship's name on the side of the ship. Garibaldi. The name of national hero Garibaldi is emblazoned on it. Chapter 386 Sudan issue. The launch of the Columbus is good news for Spain, but of course it is not for some countries. As a result, 4 ships from the Philadelphia Navy Yard, the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, and the New York Navy Yard speeded up their construction. However, this is a matter between the United States and Spain, and Italy is still on the sidelines. But on the other side, Italy can no longer sit back and watch. King Carlo, thank you for your country's continued support on the Sudan issue. I hope that our two countries will get better and better in the future. In front of Carlo, the British ambassador Sir Mandison said words of thanks. Ambassador Mandison is too polite. Regarding the Sudanese rebels, our country has always had the same attitude as your country, threatening their development and growth. For example, our country's affiliated country Abyssinia has been at war with the Sudanese rebels for dozens of years. This time, the number of soldiers increased from several thousand to more than 100,000, which effectively curbed the size of the Sudanese rebels. Therefore, on the Sudan issue, your two countries are consistent. Carlo didn't mean what he said, but he didn't dare to challenge the British Empire on the Sudan issue. Yes, the British could no longer tolerate the loss of Sudan from their control. A new round of carving up Africa is underway, and all countries are gearing up. to speed up their fight for Africa. Sudan, which was freed from the control of the British Empire, was so dazzling. Not to mention that the two-sea plan is in full swing. If you want to go from Cairo to Cape Town, it will not be possible without Sudan. Hence the British plan to reconquer Sudan. I have been preparing silently. Since last year, the newly equipped British colonial army has been testing the waters. It exchanged fire with the Sudanese army in Dongola, a city in northern Sudan, and defeated 45,000 Sudanese troops with 6,000 troops. A great victory that the British also called. He measured the quality of the Sudanese army. Now that it has been weighed, there is nothing to say next. The most important thing is to recapture Sudan as soon as possible. If you want to recapture Sudan, its neighbors must have some ideas. The Belgians, who occupy the Congo River basin in the southwest corner, would not dare to have any ideas, even if they lent him 10 carriages. To the west is the French, who have just captured the Chad basin. The French are not worried. The French colonial government, which has just captured the Chad basin, does not have such a big appetite to focus on Sudan. According to the British's own estimation, an army of less than 10,000 people could not conquer Sudan at all. Not to mention that the French had to cross the desert, which was simply impossible. To the east of Sudan, there are Italians who have been working here for many years. Although the border between the Italian colony and Sudan also had desert terrain, it was not conducive to military deployment. However, Italy has a subsidiary kingdom of Abyssinia, which has been at war with the Sudanese around Lake Tana for many years, and its strength is not weak. Moreover, the Blue Nile originates from the Abyssinian plateau, and there are rivers serving as transportation lines from high up. It can be said that apart from the United Kingdom, which occupies Egypt and Uganda, the only one that can threaten Sudan is Italy. Yes, it was precisely because Italy was a possible contender for Sudan that Ambassador Manderson paid a visit, and also to avoid certain accidents facing the visit of the British ambassador. Carlo certainly would not quarrel with Britain for the Sudan. Besides, if he really wanted to take over the Sudan, he would have done it long ago. It would be even more impossible to trick the British Empire now. He was not the Kaiser. Manderson was very satisfied with Carlo's reply. The task given by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was completed very well this time. After staying in Italy for so many years, he had already figured out the king's temper and knew what he promised. There will be no twists and turns. Thank you for the summons, Your Majesty. I will inform London of your country's kindness. Goodbye, Ambassador Manderson. After Ambassador Manderson left, Carlo called for an attendant. Send for the Foreign Secretary. As you command, Your Majesty. Half an hour later, Foreign Minister Boccona hurriedly appeared in front of Carlo. I have met His Majesty, Your Excellency Boccona. There is no need to be polite. Carlo saw Boccona coming. The British ambassador Manderson visited before and asked me about my attitude towards Sudan. I have already replied to him that our country will not interfere in Sudan. Upon hearing Carlo's words, Boccona frowned. Is the UK preparing to take back Sudan? I think it's almost the same. Otherwise, why would Ambassador Manderson come here to visit? Carlo expressed his judgment. What's wrong? Is there something unexpected? It is true that King Menelik II of Abyssinia has a different idea, but I think it can be dissuaded. What's the specific situation facing the foreign minister's hesitant words? Carlo immediately felt that there must be something wrong with it. Faced with Carlo's questioning, Boccona did not hide anything. Okay, Your Majesty, the situation is like this. It was in Boccona's narration that Carlo felt the ambition of Menelik II. After Menelik II succeeded to the throne of Abyssinia, he used troops many times to weaken the feudal separatist forces. From 1887 to 1895, he successively suppressed the rebellions of feudal princes in Lika, Velamo, Sadamo, Ogaden and other places. All this was for the purpose of centralizing power. Under this suppression, the rulers of each province and district were all appointed, which greatly strengthened the cohesion of the Abyssinian kingdom. In addition, Menelik also built a new capital in the middle of the Ethiopian plateau. Queen Tatu named it Fresh Flowers, which is indeed the city of Addis Ababa. In addition, Menelik minted national currency, printed stamps, formulated new domestic financial and postal systems, absorbed foreign investment to build roads and railways, and laid telegraph and telephone systems. Of course, capital from Italy accounts for an overwhelming share of this big move point. Now that the internal affairs have almost been repaired, how could Menelik, as a wise monarch, fail to see the weakness of his neighbors? In fact, he can see better than the British that the Sudanese people's spirit has been tortured. Even the annual match between the two countries on Lake Tana has become 2 years or even 3 or 4 years, and the distance is gradually getting farther and farther from the lakeside, reaching Famaka in the middle reaches of the Blue Nile point. Under such circumstances, Menelik II would be sorry for himself if he did not take the opportunity to expand. Of course, as a wise monarch, he certainly wanted to maximize his interests, so he planned to deal a harsh blow to the Sudanese, at least to tear off a large area of territory, so that the Abyssinian nobles who followed him would also try taste the benefits of expansion. Of course, only by obtaining Italy's approval or acquiescence can you implement your ambitions, and Menelik II was also very clear about this. He approached an Italian bank early and borrowed a large amount of money at a high interest rate. In addition, these funds were basically used to purchase Italian materials. Menelik II, who had the support of the Bank of Italy and factory owners, found it difficult for the government to refuse, so it maintained its acquiescence. You are saying that Menelik II is already preparing to further seize Damazin in the lower reaches of the Blue Nile River and the Akobo Valley in the Nile Basin. In response to Carlo's question, Bacona replied, "Yes, Your Majesty, Menelik II has been preparing for this for 3 years. He has also invested 10 million lire in improving the roads. As for the material reserves, there are even more. Well, it seems that Menelik II has invested a lot of money. In this case, it is unwise to stop the opponent's preparations. In this case, it's okay to think about it from another angle. We need to discuss this matter with the British and inform them that, in order to maintain the relationship between the two countries, we plan to ask the client country Abyssinia to send a large army to help them. Then it is best to target Menelik II, talk to the British in exchange for assisting in sending troops." Facing Carlo's thoughts, Bacona thought about it carefully. "Your Majesty, this is a good idea. It is very beneficial to our country. One more thing. Tell that Menelik II that expansion needs to be moderate, otherwise problems will easily occur." Yes, Carlo still has to give a little warning to the ambitious Menelik II, not to let him eat too much. Chapter 387 Drought. In the early spring morning, there was still a hint of chill in the air. Diane and his wife went out with their donkeys and farm tools. Today is the day to water the grapes, so the two of them ate something early and hurried to the fields. Diane's vineyard is not far from his home, only 10 minutes away. It is located on a sunny hillside with a small river at the foot of the mountain. On weekdays, Diane and his wife maintain their family's livelihood by operating this 10-acre vineyard. His father, old Diane, relied on this vineyard to raise him, and now that he has inherited this vineyard, he has to rely on it to raise his wife and children. So for him, this vineyard is his lifeblood. However, Diane, who rushed to the vineyard, carefully checked the growth of the grapes, and the wrinkles on his face became deeper. "We have to water it. If we don't water it, the vines will dry up." There was no rain this winter, and Diane began to worry about the vineyards. But what's the use of talking about it now? Keeping the growth of grapes is the most important thing, otherwise we won't be able to eat this year. After squeezing the dry soil with his hands, Diane left his wife weeding and fertilizing in the vineyard while he drove his donkey to fetch water. Don't worry about the small river ditch at the foot of the mountain. The water here has long since disappeared, leaving only a trickle. Even half a day is not enough to fetch water. Diane is going to the lower reaches of the river, where there is a small dam. Currently, the only way to get water for the vineyard is a point looking all the way. The grass on both sides of the road is sparse and listless. The soil in the fields is in a state of dryness and cracking, and the crops inside are also malnourished due to lack of water. How can we grow crops on this land without watering it? After taking one look at the miserable state of other people's land, Diane shook his head and muttered this, burying his head and continuing to move forward. Fortunately, he had a donkey, otherwise he would be too exhausted to irrigate his vineyard. Just by carrying water along the way, Diane met several familiar villagers, all carrying burdens, and planning to water their crops. But when they got to the water source, they were immediately surprised. Here, these two large groups of people were each holding poles, hose and other equipment, and they were confronting each other in a fierce and tense manner. Diane felt something bad in his heart, because he saw two waves of people, one from their village and the other from the next village. It was obvious that the two parties gathered here, definitely not to chat, but probably for the water source point. Then Diane asked an acquaintance, and found out that it was indeed the case. While fetching water today, a group of people from the next village made a fuss, saying that this place belonged to them and no one outside their village was allowed to fetch water, and the people in your own village will definitely quit. Everyone here is collecting water. Now you are saying that you are the only one who can collect water. This is simply unacceptable. So people from their village gathered together to ask for an explanation point. Obviously, both parties knew that the truth they spoke was directly proportional to the number of people, so as they called for friends, more and more people gathered. Gradually, the number increased from more than 100 to 4. A scale of 500 people point. However, the number of people is getting larger and larger, and the mood of the crowd is getting more and more excited. Point at this moment, 2 gunshots were heard, and Sheriff Bellomo from the town rushed over with his men. Seeing something was wrong, he fired 2 shots into the sky to announce his arrival. Point. Sure enough, the police still had a deterrent effect among the people. Although Chief Bellomo and his subordinates had less than 10 people, no one dared to act rashly, and could only wait for the arrival of the chief. Which of you is the leader? Come here and tell me what is going on. Under the stern gaze of Sheriff Bellomo, one person from each side was sent to negotiate with him. Mandy, Law, come with me, Sheriff. Bellomo took the 2 of them to talk. Pork, before I come back, if someone makes trouble, just shoot them. You're welcome. Okay, Sheriff, Chief. Bellomo's words immediately suppressed the atmosphere at the scene. Looking at the stern eyes of the police and the guns in their hands, no one dared to move anymore, and could only wait. Point. The 2 deputies and Sheriff Bellomo had not been talking for long when they saw the sheriff leading the 2 men out. I have learned about the situation. The water source you are arguing about belongs to the town. Now both families can use it, Sheriff. Bellomo's distribution plan did not satisfy everyone. Only some people complained. But this water is not durable. If everyone comes to use it, it will be used up in 10 days at most. Whoever is speaking, stand up for me. Seeing someone who dared to complain about his decision in private, Sheriff Bellomo became furious. A pair of fierce eyes patrolled the crowd. What's more important was that his hand had already opened the holster of the gun and touched the handle of the gun. Point. Facing the angry Sheriff Bellomo, no one dared to speak now. They all bowed their heads and remained silent like big quails. Sheriff Bellomo looked for a long time and didn't notice who was talking just now, so he suddenly changed the direction of the attack. Mandy, Luoa, if there is another fight for water, I will arrest you 2 directly. Faced with Sheriff Bellomo's warning, the 2 could only nod in acquiescence with bitter faces. Let's go. After Sheriff Bellomo saw that the matter was basically resolved, he left with his people. Of course, he also knew that this kind of thing could only be suppressed for a while. In the final analysis, it would still have to rain. But looking at the weather with clear skies, only God knows when it will rain. Point. After this farce, the 2 sides were less interested in fighting for water, so everyone started to get water, and Diane did the same, driving his donkey to water his vineyard with a leather bag filled with water. The work is very hard. Although Diane has a donkey, he also knows not to tire out this precious donkey, so after more than 10 consecutive trips, the donkey needs to rest. At this time, in order to irrigate, I can only go to battle and fetch water by myself. Point. This went on and on until the sun went down, and then the 2 of them rushed home. But as soon as he got home, Diane felt nervous because there was a man waiting at his door. Ha. Brother Diane, what are you thinking about? Our pharaoh family will definitely give a good price for this. The man who was clamoring to buy his land was Thiago Pharaoh, a member of the pharaoh family. Point. Some people may have thought that, yes, he is a member of the famous Sicilian mafia, As a mafia, you naturally need to do some illegal activities, such as assassinations, illegal business, pornography, gambling and drugs. And Thiago Ferro received funds from a certain person and wanted to buy the vineyards in Diane to expand production point. Although the suppression of the mafia has never stopped at the government level, illegal organizations that were born in the Middle Ages and wandered in the black zone still have their own way of survival. Combine with local forces and help them do things that are inconvenient for them to do in person. Besides, the mafia in Sicily has gone through so many years, and it is impossible to destroy it. I'm sorry, I won't sell my vineyard, even if I die. However, although the mafia is famous in Sicily, for Diane, the vineyard is everything to him. In order to survive, he is unwilling to sell the vineyard at any cost. Brother, Diane, I think you'd better think about it. I'll come back in half a month. I hope you can recognize the facts. Thiago Ferro didn't give Diane any nonsense, he just left after saying this. As a sinister mafia, he had many means to get the stubborn Diane to agree to sell the vineyard, such as his 12-year-old baby son. Of course, he could wait a little longer. The weather this year is too abnormal. It has not rained for too long. Many people have to abandon their farmland at a low price in order to survive. This is a good time to go on a plunder and create more profits for the family. At that time, the boss may promote himself to the position of executive officer, capo, and make himself prominent in the family. Some people are looking forward to rain, and some are looking forward to it not raining. Sicily is experiencing a human tragedy and comedy during the drought. Of course, as the Italian government, Rome knows more than these people. The drought is far beyond Sicily. Chapter 388 Disaster Relief. In the Palace of Rome, the drought in southern Italy is being discussed. Currently, according to our understanding, the most severe drought area is Sicily. According to statistics from the astronomical station, in last winter, Sicily received only 80 to 120 millimeters of rainfall, which was far lower than the 300 to 600 millimeters in previous years. In addition, the rainfall of 110 to 180 millimeters in Sardinia is also very dangerous, and the same is true in the southern part of the Kingdom Peninsula. The rainfall ranges from 120 millimeters in Cape Faro, and the rainfall becomes more and more towards the north. Until Florence, the rainfall is the same as in previous years. The same. This is the rainfall distribution map of last winter produced by our Meteorological Bureau. Your Majesty and all ministers can take a look. The director of the Meteorological Bureau opened a map of Italy with a nervous look on his face, on which the differences in rainfall were marked in various colors. It clearly shows the rainfall conditions in various places in Italy last winter. Carlo looked at the rainfall distribution map in front of him and said, Director Cox, can I ask if your Meteorological Bureau has any estimates of climate change in Italy in the future? Carlo's words made all the ministers present look at Director Cox point as the center of attention. The meteorological director felt heavy pressure coming to him. Your Majesty, our Meteorological Bureau has also calculated before, based on the meteorological change data for hundreds of years, atmospheric droughts as rare as last winter have only occurred 4 times in Italy in a century, and the most recent one was the drought of 1881. There is a half chance that this drought will subside in the second year, and there is a 30% chance that it will last for 2 years. Of course, there is also a very abnormal situation, but this probability is very low and unlikely. Clearly this man knows the consequences of unseasonal rainfall, which can be even more dire than a prolonged drought. Thank you very much for your explanation. We already know. Faced with the king's kind words, Director Cox, who was granted amnesty, immediately left sensibly. Staying at this time was not a wise choice. Sure enough, before he could walk away, he heard Carlo say, Everyone, it is now clear that a drought is inevitable and a repeat of the 1881 situation is likely. Carlo's words made everyone present feel nervous. Italy suffered heavy losses from the drought in 1881, directly losing Tunisia, which had been cultivating for many years. Or to put it another way, if France's invasion of Tunisia had not aroused public sentiment in Italy and diverted everyone's attention, the Italian government would have been even more sad. However, there is still a set of data that records the impact of the drought on Italy. In 1881, the number of immigrants from Italy was 390,000, which was 150,000 more than the previous year. In the following 2 years, the number of immigrants from Italy was 340,000 and 290,000. It was not until 1885 that the number of immigrants returned to less than 200,000. This is enough to show that there are a lot of immigrants. In addition, in the past 3 years, riots, vandalism, looting and other vicious incidents have tripled compared with previous years, so much so that the prison had to release some minor criminals with shorter sentences in advance to make room. Therefore, when faced with Carlo's inquiry, the important ministers present also knew the seriousness of the problem. Your Majesty, according to my preliminary estimate, the affected population should be between 12 million and 15 million. Interior Minister Idris looked at the rainfall distribution map hanging on the wall and spoke out his estimate. The Ministry of the Interior also manages a census, so looking at the affected area, it can estimate the approximate number of people affected. But his words made everyone frown. Half of the population has been affected by the disaster, but the news couldn't be worse. At this time, Agriculture Secretary Mark Ryder also added, according to estimates from our Ministry of Agriculture, if there continues to be no rainfall, a major reduction in agricultural production this year is bound to happen. The national agricultural production will probably be reduced by about 22%. Among them, the agricultural production in Sicily will be reduced by about 50%, and the agricultural production in Sardinia will be reduced by about 50%. It is 45%. South of Naples it is 35%. From north of Naples to south of Rome it is 30%. And from north of Rome to Florence it is 20%. The Minister of Agriculture's words made many people present feel really worried. A 20% reduction in agricultural output would cause serious problems. You must know that, although Italy has developed well in recent years, agriculture still accommodates the largest number of laborers. It can be said that this reduction in agricultural production is very bad for Italy. Italy originally had insufficient grain production, so it could only maintain its livelihood by growing high-value cash crops and then purchasing grain from Eastern Europe. The current reduction in cash crop production will affect too many people and may even bring instability to the Kingdom of Italy, so no one dares to ignore the power of this drought. Everyone, do you have any solutions? Looking at the rainfall distribution map in front of him and thinking about the more than 10 million people affected by the disaster, Carlo immediately asked, "This situation has seriously affected the stability of the kingdom and must be taken seriously. I suggest that we start infrastructure construction in the disaster-stricken areas, such as ditches, bridges, roads and other facilities. In addition, we should also start construction of water conservancy facilities in various places that may be in disrepair during this period." Transportation. Secretary Pedersen put forward his own suggestions. Of course, the method must be the transportation aspect that he is most familiar with. Of course, water conservancy facilities can also be mentioned incidentally. With the Ministry of Transport taking the lead, ministers from other departments immediately learned from it and offered advice and suggestions. In view of the reduction in crop production, the Ministry of Agriculture should take the lead and try to guide the quality and quantity of exported agricultural products. The Minister of Agriculture, who was a step too late, had to find a way to increase farmers' income. In view of the seriousness of the situation in the disaster-stricken areas, I suggest strengthening the local police force and always pay attention to the local public sentiment and grievances. In addition, the local garrison also needs to be strengthened to ensure that the government has sufficient ability to suppress the local area and prevent evil element from taking the opportunity to cause chaos. Home Secretary Edlis also gave his own views. Of course, in addition to these two people, there are other people's suggestions. Anyway, they are nothing more than suppressing public sentiments and grievances, meeting the needs of people's livelihood, and recruiting redundant labor to avoid causing regional unrest. Of course, these people's suggestions were very good, and Carlo thought they were reasonable, but they seemed to have forgotten one issue. Fortunately, the finance minister, Baron Tostan, did not forget. If you want to provide disaster relief, you must have funds. especially in this year's extremely large-scale drought. Disaster relief funds are needed in huge amounts, and the government's emergency fund of 80 million lira is simply impossible to use. So we should issue a disaster relief bonds should preferably have a term of 5 to 10 years. Well, since we are talking about bonds, Carlo has to ask, Sir Tostan, how many disaster relief bonds is appropriate, based on the cost of disaster relief in 1881 and the current price level? I think an emergency bond of 800 million liras with a term of 5 to 10 years should be sufficient. Tostan gave a professional answer. Based on his own knowledge, 800 million lira funds is not a small amount, accounting for more than 60% of the total government revenue. But I remember that in 1981 the government only spent 520 million lira on disaster relief. Yes, it was true that only 520 million was spent that year. But Your Majesty, the disaster relief was incomplete and ended in a lot. If we want to avoid the results of that year, we must have less disaster relief funds. Facing Tostan's words, Carlo thought about it and acquiesced. After all, rescuing disasters is like putting out fires, and there should be no hesitation or reluctance at all point. But there is still one problem, which Carlo believes must be determined first. How much food does the government plan to purchase for disaster relief? Purchasing food. Yes, in terms of purchasing food, we, Carlo, could see that the government did not plan to purchase much food. His expression was a little subtle. Is this a government dominated by a left-wing party? Your Majesty, this issue is a bit complicated and needs some time to explain. At this time Prime Minister Antonio stood up. The Prime Minister's face must be given. Carlo had no choice but to reply, "Okay, I can wait for your explanation." Then, as if the matter was over, they continued to discuss the issue of disaster relief. Chapter 389 Dissatisfaction. You mean, the government won't get involved in food procurement? For the first time, Carlo felt that something ruining his outlook was happening right in front of him, and this food purchase was one of them. The reason is very simple. Italy purchases grain from Romania and Russia in Eastern Europe. There are many large landowners in these two countries who occupy vast areas. Buying grain directly from them is cheaper than intergovernmental procurement, about 8 to 8 per ton, 12% off the price. Where there is profit, there is buying and selling, and some people take advantage of this price difference and specialize in this kind of business. Italy's food procurement in recent years has basically followed this model because it saves money. Italy's finances are not well off, so every one of them can be saved. Your Majesty, it is indeed easier to discuss this with private individuals than with the government, and it is also kept confidential. Antonio explained to Carlo the purpose of this. Then, follow the method you have been using. What else could Carlo say? It would be nice to save money, especially when the drought is so severe, and every lira is precious. The Italian government is fully prepared for the coming drought, and all departments are busy with this, especially for disaster relief, which is the most urgent fund. The Italian government issued a batch of 10-year government bonds worth 800 million lira in London and Paris in April. The annual interest rate of this batch of treasury bonds is not high, only 4.25%. However, thanks to Italy's good development pattern in recent years, these treasury bonds have sold well. More than 10 securities contractors are willing to underwrite this batch of treasury bonds for Italy. As time goes by, the drought in Italy gradually becomes apparent after the summer season. Scenes of the scorching sun, dry ground, and withered grass seedlings appear frequently in southern Italy, especially in Sicily, which is the most severely affected by drought. The drought is even more troublesome. The next set of data can illustrate the severity of Sicily's drought. Since 1897, Sicily's climate monitoring station has detected that the average rainfall on the entire island of Sicily is only 35 millimeters. Of the 94 rivers in Sicily, 73 have stopped flowing, and 46 have completely dried up. All 2.4 million people on the island have been affected by the disaster, and a 50% reduction in agricultural production is a foregone conclusion. The drought in Sicily has not only affected agriculture. As the core enterprise of Sicily's industrialization, the Palermo steel plant recently announced that it would cut its steel production by half. The reason is simple. Steel smelting requires a lot of water, and the current drought in Sicily has affected the production activities of the Palermo steel plant. Point of course, in addition to Sicily, Sardinia and the southern region of the kingdom were also hit hard. The total affected population reached 13 million, accounting for 40% of the total population of Italy. With such a high number of disaster-stricken people, the Italian government will certainly not wait any longer. As summer approaches, Italy has successively announced several major construction projects, including the construction of the road from Naples to Taranto, the Sicilian Ring Road, and the Sardinia Ring Road. Large-scale projects such as road construction. In addition, the Ministry of Agriculture has also opened many water conservancy facilities, such as reservoirs, dams, ditches, and countless others. Since so many projects have been started, a lot of labor is naturally needed. As a result, notices for recruiting laborers were everywhere in major towns, especially in areas with severe droughts. Grassroots officials continue to publicize these notices for recruiting workers. Basic officials are very enthusiastic about this kind of thing. After all, they are the ones who can directly feel the severity of the disaster and are more worried about too many victims than others. Of course, with so many people affected by the disaster, the government cannot solve all the problems. It can only provide some relief to most of the people who are affected by the disaster and cannot afford to eat. This kind of poverty-stricken government gives priority to those who have some land savings, which is a bit difficult to deal with. Because there are too many people affected by the disaster, the government can only focus on solving the serious problems first. In this case, it is no less than a disaster for these people who still have a small income. There were no tears in Diane's eyes. Looking at the dry grapevines, his heart was filled with despair. This year's harvest has been scrapped. What do you ask him to take to support his family? Looking at the smooth cut of the grapevine, Diane certainly knew what the problem was. It was all caused by this vineyard. Even if they worked hard, those people would not let them go. Seeing that the drought could not subdue them, they fell into conspiracy. Who else but those other proof of these smooth cut vines? Stop crying. Let's go back. Diane comforted his wife, who had been crying, and patted her shoulder gently. Diane, these people destroyed our vineyards. Why don't the police arrest them? The wife, who was crying like a tearful person, could not accept everything in front of her. In a hoarse voice, she reluctantly asked her husband, who was actually her mainstay, didn't the police say it all? They can't arrest people without evidence, unless someone sees what they did. As Diane said words of comfort to his wife, the policeman's nonchalant answer appeared in his mind. Okay, stop crying, let's go home. After finally coaxing his wife, who was crying like a child, they helped her back to their house. But when I got home, I heard that annoying voice. Brother Diane, can we talk about the vineyard now? Thiago Ferro appeared in front of them again this time, but this time he was not alone. He came with two strong thug-like subordinates. It seemed that even the mafia was afraid of death. Faced with Thiago's questions, Diane remained silent. Who is Thiago? One look at Diane's silence and he knew that his heart was loose, so the verbal offensive was about to begin. Actually, if you think about it carefully, your annual income from the vineyard is only about 1,400 lire. After deducting fertilizer and other expenses, the money you earn is only 1,000 lire, which is only enough for your family of 3. Now any job in the city can cost hundreds for 1 month of lire. You two workers are worth more than 200 lire, and this year it is nearly 3,000 lire. Isn't it more profitable than grape growing? So it is better to go out and find a job now when you are farming at home. This seems very tempting, and you can indeed earn more by working in the city than in the countryside. The only problem is how to find this job. It's not that easy to find jobs in this city, and it's unclear whether you can get your salary on time. Of course, these situations are indeed tempting for the Diane couple who do not know the inside story. Let's do this. I'll pay you 10,000 lire for your vineyard. This is the highest price I can give out of brotherhood. Thiago raise the price to 1,000 lire more than before. Okay, for 10,000 lire, I'll sell you my vineyard. Faced with the price offered by Thiago, Diane accepted. My brother Diane, your decision is quite wise. We signed the land purchase contract, and these 10,000 lire are yours, Thiago. Took out a contract and a thick wad of lira bills, and placed them in front of Diane. Diane took a rough look at it. It was a formal contract to purchase his vineyard. After seeing that there were no problems, Diane signed his name and fingerprinted it. Thiago found the contract with his fingerprints and name, and placed the wad of banknotes in front of him. Brother, Diane, this is your money, count it yourself, not bad. Exactly 10,000 lire. After the transaction was completed, Thiago held the contract with satisfaction and waved his hand. Goodbye my friend. Goodbye, my friend. Diane also had a smile on his face, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. After Thiago walked away, his wife, who had been watching all this silently, suddenly hugged Diane from behind. Diane, you have to promise me not to do anything stupid. For little Tony, he cannot live without his father. As a bedfellow, the wife clearly felt that something was wrong with her husband Diane. The vineyard was gone, and she could no longer accept her husband's irrationality. Facing his pleading wife, and thinking of his son, Diane finally had no choice but to swallow his breath. Okay, I promise you, I won't do anything stupid. On Thiago's side, one of his men said, after leaving Diane's house, "Boss, I feel like there's something wrong with the man named Diane, and I need to be on guard." Faced with the warning from his men, Thiago said with a smile, "I know that Diane is very dissatisfied. I hope he won't do anything stupid, otherwise he will lose the 10,000 lire and his family will be affected. Yes, as a mafia, since they dare to do such evil things as forcing girls into prostitution, how can they not be at all defensive? Forced annexations like Diane's are not common in Sicily, but they are not uncommon either. In fact, not only in Sicily, but also in the south, there are many cases of annexation taking advantage of the drought. This is a real contribution to Italy's stability and unity. Chapter 390 Out of control. What did the Prime Minister say? Carlo looked at the information in front of him and asked his captain of the guard with an unhappy expression. Carlo is very dissatisfied now. What makes him dissatisfied is that some officials in this disaster relief work, those mediocre officials who did not show their disaster relief capabilities at all, completely failed to live up to his expectations. These people are completely indifferent to disaster relief. Instead, they are proficient in taking advantage of others, taking bribes and bending the law. Although Italy has dealt with many of these insidious insects in recent years, how can this situation be solved once and for all? And Carlo considered the urgency of disaster relief in the year of severe drought, so he needed to keep an eye on these guys, who might do bad things. After all, many disaster relief measures needed to go through them. As long as he was a little careful, the damage caused would be huge. That's right, Carlo's requirements for officials are very low now. Corruption is not the original sin, but poor performances. Idiots like this who are both corrupt and bad should be put on the shooting range. Of course, this is just a thought. Even if Carlo is the king, he cannot do this. Didn't the last emperor Changzhen, who treated officials like this, lose his country? After all, he doesn't have the same power and monopoly position as Changzhen. Even now, Carlo has shown himself to be wise and powerful, and some things still need to be discussed. This is the biggest difference between Western monarchs and Eastern monarchs, and Carlo has also been deeply touched by it over the years. Therefore, those who are found to be incompetent officials can only be left to the Prime Minister to deal with them. After all, it would be fine if there were only one or two. If there are too many people, it is difficult to guarantee that the monarch will not be seen as abusing his power. When the time comes, the officials will be collectively dissatisfied, which will outweigh the gains and losses. After all, Italy can live without a monarch, but it cannot live without officials. Your Majesty, the Prime Minister said that he will send people to inspect. If there is such a thing, it will be dealt with seriously. Carlo felt unsettled by the words of the captain of the guard, so he asked instead, "Is there anything unclear about the investigation?" Carlo looked at the information. The evidence was solid, so there was no need to bother. Of course, Carlo also knew this, and it had nothing to do with Captain McClung. Forget it, let's get down. Carlo's words made McClung feel like he was being pardoned, and he quickly walked out of the room. But before the door could close, he came back again. Your Majesty, the Prime Minister is here to visit. Now that the true master has come, I can see him, no matter what he says. Carlo immediately recovered and answered. Then what are you waiting for? Let the Prime Minister come in. I have met His Majesty. You're welcome, Prime Minister. What's the matter with your visit this time? Facing the Prime Minister's visit, Carlo asked with a smile on his face. Faced with Carlo's inquiry, Antonio didn't waste any time and went straight to the topic. Your Majesty, that's it. Didn't you send someone a list of corrupt officials before? Our government actually attaches great importance to it, but considering the seriousness of the current drought, in order to avoid dampening the enthusiasm of officials for disaster relief, I think it would be better to postpone the review. The Prime Minister's words made Carlo burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, why should I take it seriously? It turns out this is it. You guys have thought it through very carefully. I was in a panic at the time. It's too polite of you to bother the Prime Minister to go there in person. Your Majesty, even if I don't have this matter, I still need to make a trip. Isn't this the start of disaster relief fundraising? Our government hopes that it is best for the royal family to take charge of this matter. This donation to the royal family can greatly encourage the people of the Kingdom of Love. If you're interested, I'll tell the Queen later and ask her to organize a fundraising event for all the ladies. Carlo spoke with the Prime Minister for half an hour, and after discussing some other trivial matters, the Prime Minister left. After he left, Carlo looked angry. This time the Prime Minister appeared to be explaining, but in reality he was denying his decision. Why is there a reason to avoid dampening officials' enthusiasm for disaster relief? Of course, simply getting angry can't solve the problem at all. Now Carlo is eager to know what went wrong with the government. There must be something he doesn't know, otherwise it wouldn't be like this. He has a hunch that, if he doesn't find out, there is a big possibility that things will get out of control. Of course, in the evening, in a hidden room in the palace, Carlo spoke to the person in front of him. I'll check to see if there's anything going on the government's side, and check on the political party's side as well. I always have a feeling that someone is doing something behind my back, hiding it from me. As you command, Your Majesty. The investigation takes time, and Carlo is patient enough to wait. But the next day, good news came. Did the Abyssinians win? I think so, Your Majesty. Carlo looked at the telegram in front of him and felt that this was really an unpredictable fate. This telegram stated that at the end of March this year, Menelik II took his carefully prepared 80,000 troops and invaded Sudan in one fell swoop. It went all the way down the Blue Nile, looking ready to march on Khartoum. Facing the invasion of its old rival, the Sudanese army will certainly not let it do what it wants. Sultan Caliph Abdullah even summoned an army of 100,000 troops and gathered in Senna, a city in the middle reaches of the Blue Nile. Senna is a hub city in Sudan. In addition to Blue Nile shipping, it has a road connecting the Darfur region in the west, Port Sudan in the east, and Eritrea. Its geographical location is very important. The two sides fought several battles around the city, but finally the Abyssinians, who were superior in equipment and well trained, relatively, had the last laugh, and the Sudanese army suffered a major defeat. But this time Menelik II came well prepared, chasing Sudan's defeated army all the way to its core city of Khartoum. If Abdullah hadn't deployed some troops in the city to guard against the British, then the city was likely to be captured in one fell swoop. Even if he was not captured in one fell swoop, it would be difficult for Abdullah to be surrounded in Khartoum. Menelik II led his army to not only surround Khartoum, but also looted large areas of surrounding villages and tribes, plundering a large amount of food and livestock. During this period, the Sudanese also organized several reinforcements, but they were all defeated. Those reinforcements were poorly equipped and poorly trained, let alone combat effectiveness. In view of this situation, Abdullah directly asked Menelik II outside the city for peace. It's normal to be defeated and sue for a draw, because everyone knows that if you want to defeat your opponent in one go, don't even think about it. Of course, Menelik II would not reject his old rival's request for peace, but the other party accepted the fish and meat on the chopping board and let him slaughter it. After some king-to-king negotiations, Menelik II won a great victory. In addition to the two fertile lands with lush water and grass in the Akobo Valley and the Damazin area. The Sudan also wanted to cede the Sobat Valley to the Kingdom of Abyssinia. In addition, Menelik II asked for 10,000 horses, 10,000 cattle, 40,000 sheep, 2,000 camels and other supplies as rewards for a treating point facing the Abyssinians who had gained a lot. Carlo thought for a moment and said, "Send a telegram to Menelik II and ask him to prepare 100,000 tons of grain and 50,000 cattle and sheep. I guarantee that the territory he has captured will not be taken back by the British. Your Majesty, is it okay to send a report like this? Just listen to me. That Menelik II is a smart man. He knows what to do." Chapter 391 Double-Edged Sword. You're saying they are pushing for suffrage changes in that hidden room? Carlo looked at the man in front of him in surprise. The news was so shocking that he couldn't believe it. Point facing Carlo's question, the spy leader immediately answered, "Yes, Your Majesty. According to what we have investigated, the left-wing parties have reached an agreement that this matter will be promoted in Parliament, and the time is already very soon. We did not get the specific time, but it will probably be in October." The secret agent's words made Carlo suddenly realize that it was no wonder that the previous batch of officials who violated disciplines were not punished. It turned out to be because they wanted to promote the amendment of suffrage rights regarding the plan to amend the suffrage. Carlo has also seen it. There are several main provisions. The first one is to lower the age limit for men to obtain the right to vote from 25 to 21 years old. The second one is also crucial. Italy has obtained the right to vote. The conditions for the right to vote were reduced from annual tax payment of 40 lire to 15 lire. Sound familiar? Yes, the electoral reform bill that the previous Prime Minister Despotis worked hard for and vigorously promoted is not much different from this. It can even be said that it is not as radical. Of course, here, retired Prime Minister Despotis has absolutely no chance of running away and will definitely support silently behind the scenes. As for other political parties, even if they do not support it, they at least have a tacit acquiescence. Otherwise, such a big event would have been delayed until now. And in this, one thing worth thinking about is that all political parties deliberately concealed the news from Carlo. At least the political parties that had the ability to know the news had a tacit understanding to suppress the spread of the news. This attitude is what Carlo needs to think deeply about. Why does the political party have this attitude towards Carlo? In fact, this requires Carlo to reflect on himself. For example, the last time Crispy informed him of the plans of former Prime Minister Despotis, Carlo needed to at least give him some rewards anyway. This is the attitude a monarch should have. And he didn't give any rewards or awards at all, which was a very inappropriate move. As a monarch, one cannot decide based on personal preference. It is obvious that Carlo violated this taboo in this matter. Looking back now, since the retirement of former Prime Minister Despotis, Carlo has less scruples in handling many things. This also caused him to have a lot less worries when doing things. In layman's terms, that means he was carefree. However, the consequences of this failure were also very serious, which directly led to the political parties reaching an agreement without his knowledge and preparing to pass the electorate amendment bill. Carlo sees the bill very clearly as a counterattack by the political parties against their monopoly of power some time ago. As for Prime Minister Antonio, this is easy to understand. He is the head of officials and cannot be separated from the masses. Besides, which official is willing to give up on such a thing? But even though he knew it, it was very difficult for Carlo to solve this problem. First of all, this was the unanimous interest of all political parties, and given what happened to Crispy before, basically no rational person would want to speculate. From this point of view, he has no way to change the voting rights plan. This feeling of having no choice is very bad. Carlo has almost forgotten this feeling. The last time seemed to be when Caroli was Prime Minister. In order to remember this lesson, Carlo gave himself a day off, meditating on his mistakes in a secret room, and learning his lessons faced with the king's actions. The guards were a little worried, and even Queen Maria came to visit with her son Prince Vittorio. But everyone didn't have to wait long. Carlo reappeared in front of everyone in the evening. "Macron is preparing dinner. I'm hungry." The energetic voice made the captain of the guard smile and reassured his wife Maria. Point of course, after a night of repairs, Carlo continued to work energetically the next day. Macron, what's going on with the National Progressive Party? Carlo asked as soon as he came up. Some time ago, there was a lot of noise about this new political party. Your Majesty, they changed their name. Changed your name. These words made Carlo a little confused. Changing the name of the party needs to be very cautious, because changing the name is a major event, comparable to the reorganization of a political party. Not seeing Carlo's confused expression, the captain of the guard continued. Yes, Your Majesty, this National Progressive Party has a new name, called the National Socialist National Party. As for why the name was changed, Carlo finally understood it from the captain of the guard's narration. Isn't this how the left-wing parties took turns attacking this new far-right party some time ago, in the absence of any cooperation from right-wing parties in the same camp? Even if Cruz led the National Progressive Party to resist and speak out, the vitality of the National Progressive Party was still severely damaged, and its membership dropped from more than 48,000 at the beginning to the lowest level, 3,000 people. At this time, the National Progressive Party had been reduced from a potential political party in the country to an almost unknown third-rate small party. This also fully proves that Mr. Cruz is not a person who can turn the tide. At least he is much worse than a failed art student in Austria and a third-rate tabloid reporter in Italy. At this critical moment, after some discussion and deliberation, Cruz and the others decided to change the name of the party. The reason is simple. Under attack from left-wing parties, the name of their party has become a bit disgusting. It might be better to change the name at this time. Finally, after some deliberations, the National Socialist Party with a slight left-wing disguise was born. This time they did not dare to promote such radical slogans. Instead, they shouted their slogans much milder. Of course, this does not change the core of its political philosophy. The National Socialist Party, which has changed its name, is still a far-right party. It's really interesting. The Socialist National Party in this country is really interesting. Carlo has some new ideas in his heart, but he still needs to think about it. Because this approach is a bit unbelievable, and it may also cause trouble by raising tigers, but there are many benefits to doing so. Generally speaking, it is a double-edged sword that can hurt both others and yourself. What troubles Carlo, this is a bit surprising to say, it is to support the transformation of the National Socialist Party. Yes, although the current far-right party seems weak and has no strength, only Carlo knows that, although the far-right party has many shortcomings, there is one thing that makes people very envious. And that is its organizational and mobilization power. Sometimes, as long as you pay more attention, you will find that among the left and right parties, the extreme left and extreme right have the most combat effectiveness. Of course Carlo knows this, but sometimes, this kind of party with paranoid ideas has miraculous effects on some difficult problems. Italy has many thorny problems, such as the labor movement in the north, the Mayfair problem in the south, and the remaining feudal forces obstructing industrialization. Although it only takes slow changes, these problems will eventually be solved. But Italy is running out of time. Although Carlo doesn't know if the war will break out on time, even though he has changed beyond recognition, this war cannot run away at all. Europe will use the war to solve various problems. There is no end to this war unless all countries give up social Darwinism and eat fast and chant Buddha together. But is this possible? In this case, Italy must make adequate preparations before this happens. This preparation is not only about military and people's livelihood, but also about politics. To be fair, the far left and the far right have the most social organizational power and can also make people suffer greater losses. This is what Carlo values most and what he needs most. Of course, he could only decide these words after carefully observing the National Socialist Party. As for now, disaster relief is still important. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 Navy Act. The drought in Italy lasted until the end of 1897. During most of this year, the drought in Italy was alleviated with the concerted efforts of the people and the government. Of course, the consumption of relief materials in Italy was also high point. However, all this is inferior to October. A large amount of sufficient rainfall in southern Italy has lifted the drought, and at the same time, people from all walks of life in Italy breathed a sigh of relief. However, although the drought has been lifted, everyone, including Carlo and the Prime Minister, looked ugly when looking at the ruined treasury. This drought has put greater pressure on Italy's finances, and it will have hard times again. Of course, on one of these days, Parliament quietly passed the suffrage amendment bill. However, in the face of this matter, Carlo could only pretend that he didn't see it. Of course, in addition to the bad things happening in the country, there are also big things happening in Germany. German Navy Minister Tirpitz, who only took office in June this year, proposed the famous Navy Bill to the German Parliament, which was also the first Navy Bill. In the bill, Tirpitz requested that by 1904, the German naval fleet should be equipped with 18 capital ships, 8 coastal defense armored ships, and 40 cruisers. At a cost of more than 490 million marks. Does it feel like something is wrong? That's right, this naval bill has 1 less cruiser and 2 less cruisers than in history, and the cost of shipbuilding is actually more than 10 million marks higher. The reason for the difference from history still lies with Carlo. After Italy shared its naval technology and military concepts with Germany, the development of the German Navy was somewhat different. First of all, in the exchange of naval warship design, naval designers from Italy taught their German counterparts a lesson. The Brandenburg class and Frederick III class, previously built by their German counterparts, were criticized a lot. Of course, just criticizing this is not convincing. After all, if you just talk without practicing tricks, anyone can find the faults in the opponent's warship. After all, there is no perfect warship. Only after the Italian colleagues came up with various modification opinions and explanations of their effects, did the German colleagues become convinced. Of course, in the exchanges between designers, there is someone who is still so eye-catching, and that's right, it's you, His Excellency Vittorio Cuniberti. This talented battleship designer, who has attracted attention all over the world, has also attracted the attention of many people. Not only did he communicate with his German counterparts, he was also invited to meet and communicate with Rear Admiral Tirpitz, the head of the German Navy, and Kaiser Wilhelm II. After some exchanges, the two were equally impressed by his talent. Rear Admiral Tirpitz even said that, if the German warships were designed by him, the performance of the German warships would be improved by at least 5%. As for the Kaiser, he went too far. He extended an invitation to the talented designer and offered him the title of Viscount, as long as he was willing to work for Germany. No way. For these two Navy fanatics, Vittorio Cuniberti was like a hungry man meeting a delicious meal. Of course, it was Vittorio Cuniberti's talent for shipbuilding that made them feel reluctant to part with each other. One more thing, I have always felt that there are not many outstanding German battleship designers, and this is not a source of war. You can think about it carefully. Who are the outstanding battleship designers in Germany? Of course, there is a reason why the two of them are so obsessed with their talents. Once when the two men were talking to Cuniberti, Rear Admiral Tirpitz half-jokingly proposed the technical requirements for a new German battleship. 3 days later, Cuniberti came up with a design plan. Of course, Cuniberti himself said that this plan was modified from the original plan, but coming up with a plan in 3 days still shocked everyone. More importantly, this plan is very good. After observing it, the German colleagues all said that their designs would not be better than it, which is very embarrassing. During this exchange, German designers learned a lot. At least the problem of wasting tonnage can be corrected to some extent. After all, the high requirements of the Italian Navy left designers no chance of wasting tonnage. Of course, in addition to designers, exchanges between the two countries are also very useful in terms of warship technology. The exchange of large caliber naval guns, boilers, steam engines, optical sights and other equipment has benefited the two navies a lot. In any case, in the face of the massive expansion of the German Navy, Italy can only watch the excitement. Because of this drought, Italy's finances will not be able to recover for several years. This is too expensive to keep up with. Point for the Italian Navy. There is only envy in their eyes when their German counterparts are preparing to start construction on a large scale. It would be good if they can keep 3 Garibaldi class patrol ships now, and they want to continue to expand. They want nothing more. What's going on? This is caused by the drought. Because the drought was not severe before, the government was under great financial pressure. Of course, I was thinking of finding money from everywhere, and at that time the shipyard had just sent away 2 Spanish ships of the same model. Wasn't this the plan? To replace the 2 ships of the Navy. As a result, someone suggested that when Italy's finances are currently so tight, the construction of 2 cruise ships, with a total cost of up to 68 million lire, should be slowed down first. In other words, one ship will be built first, and then construction of the other ship will be started after financial relief. Such a proposal within the government immediately aroused dissatisfaction from the Navy. For this reason, Admiral Yagi, the Admiral of the Navy, publicly lost his temper at a meeting. The Navy has contributed so much to the country and worked so hard to protect the country's trade every year, but there are still people who are talking about cutting the Navy's shipbuilding expenses. Don't let him meet this kind of person, otherwise he won't be polite to him. Well, Admiral Yagi relies on his physical strength and his attitude of wanting to compete with others. Although it is rough, it is effective. This talk of wanting the Navy to save shipbuilding costs subsequently dissipated. However, although this kind of talk has dissipated, the Italian Navy is still watching closely. It cannot relax its vigilance until the 2 patrol ships are halfway built. For the Italian Navy, the current equipment and patrol gap is serious, and these 2 equipment and patrol ships are too important to the Navy. Of course, in addition to these 2 ships being outfitted for patrol, the Italian Navy also needs to pay attention to the 3 Genoa-class battleships that have been launched and outfitted. Genoa, Bologna, Cagliari. Although the tonnage of these 3 warships has been reduced, their performance is not inferior to the Turin class at all, and some areas have even been strengthened. Of course, as a new ship, it is better than the Turin class, which has been in service for nearly 10 years. The more than 2,000 officers and soldiers prepared for this class of warships have also begun to become familiar with the warships and are waiting for the sea trials after the outfitting is completed. Italian naval officers and soldiers are waiting for the new ship, and there are also people waiting. Chapter 393 The American Pretender Patrol launches. The Brooklyn Shipyard in New York is the most technologically advanced shipyard of the US Navy, so more than half of the large US warships are built here. As the first armored cruiser in the United States over 10,000 tons, 2 Pennsylvania-class ships were built here. Today, the Brooklyn Shipyard is decorated because today is a good day for the launch of the US Pennsylvania, the first battleship of this class. So on both sides of the number 2 dock, where the Pennsylvania was located, there were crowds of people participating in the launching ceremony. What a beautiful battleship! As the most important guest at today's launching ceremony, Theodore Roosevelt, who was the New York commissioner 2 years ago, is no longer what he used to be. He now serves as the Deputy Secretary of the Navy. Of course, just being a deputy minister is no big deal, but Roosevelt's deputy minister is extraordinary, because his immediate boss, Secretary of the Navy John Long, had been ill for a long time and could not handle political affairs. He was equivalent to the full secretary. In addition, President McKinley was not interested in the Navy, so Mr. Roosevelt could serve as Deputy Secretary. He controls the US Navy and has all the power. More importantly, he is only 39 years old. It is not an exaggeration to say that he is the son of destiny. It is indeed a beautiful battleship. This was the praise of his friend Commodore George Dewey, and he was right. Compared with several large warships in the current US Navy, the slender Pennsylvania is indeed very good looking. Yes, thank you to the workers at the Brooklyn Shipyard for your hard work. I heard that they worked overtime for the Pennsylvania and West Virginia. It was really hard. Rear Admiral Samplin looked at the battleship that was about to be launched, smiled and said thank you to the shipyard workers. Samplin, I heard that these 4 cruise ships will be arranged in your South Atlantic fleet. Dewey looked at Major General Samplin and couldn't help but ask point-faced with Dewey's inquiry. Samplin did not deny it. This is just to make them familiar with the sea conditions of the Caribbean as soon as possible. You also know that without our help, those Cubans don't know when they will be independent. Indeed, these Cubans were still a little bit worse when facing the Spanish army. That's why we need to help the Cuban people gain independence, and the Navy needs to play a leading role in promoting Cuba's independence. Theodore Roosevelt was so naked when he opened his mouth, which can be regarded as a clear statement point that's right. In order to show the strength of the United States and to obtain the benefits of Cuba, American capitalists can't wait any longer. As for Cuba, the United States proposed the idea of purchasing Cuba to Spain, which was heavily in debt at the time, in 1880, with a bid of up to $120 million US. This price is nearly 17 times more expensive than buying Alaska from Russia. For the United States to be willing to pay such a high price to purchase Cuba also shows its desire for Cuba. However, the US proposal was categorically rejected by Spain. Cuba is one of the few high-quality Spanish colonies. How could the cows that provide generous taxes every year be sold for such a small amount of money? Faced with the Spanish rejection, the United States later supported the independence of the Cuban people and directly broke away from Spanish rule. The American presence can be seen more or less behind Cuba's one-on-one independence movement in recent years. In addition, due to the distance, the United States has a first-come first-served basis and has invested heavily in Cuba, which has further aggravated the influence of the Americans on Cuba. Coupled with the smooth development in these years, the US economy has become the first in the world. The rapidly expanding economy has pushed the already aggressive United States to expand even more frantically, seeking new sources of raw materials, commodity sales markets, and investment sites in order to extract more high monopoly profits. But just as the United States was preparing to expand overseas, the entire world had been carved up by the old colonial powers. At this time, the aging Spain came into view. Firstly, it is not strong and is suitable for the United States to practice. Secondly, its colony Cuba is very coveted. In addition, Puerto Rico and the Philippines in Asia have a very high strategic status. It is simply perfect leveling candidate. Therefore, knowledgeable people in the United States are very interested in Spain. If Spain had not suddenly purchased 2 cruise ships, the United States would have started plotting a war against Spain. Of course, it's not too late now. Spain purchased 2 cruise ships after a desperate struggle. The United States, with its deep pockets, directly built 4 ships. In addition to the several cutting-edge battleships it had built before, Spain would have no chance of survival unless God showed up to help. Don't worry, Your Excellency Minister, I know how to do it, and I will make it combat effective as soon as possible. Major General Samplin, who was satisfied with his ambition, knew his purpose and promised, that's but you have to pay attention that these warships will be launched within 3 months. You need to arrange excellent candidates to operate the ship. Why did Theodore Roosevelt know so well? It was because he strictly required the shipyard to ensure delivery time, so he could allow this class of equipment to be launched in a rare centralized manner. Can each fleet deploy veterans to support it? That's right. Major General Samplin knew that he had a heavy task, so he opened his mouth to offer advice. No problem. I will send a telegram to General Walker and Colonel Evans and ask them to mobilize experienced officers and sailors. Faced with Major General Samplin's request, Theodore Roosevelt agreed immediately. Because he knows the urgency of the matter, the US Navy is currently only waiting for 4 Pennsylvania-class patrol ships to be commissioned before it can prepare to cause trouble in Cuba. Your Excellency, Deputy Minister, can the launching ceremony begin? While the 3 of them were chatting, the shipyard manager came over and asked, sure, no problem. Facing the manager's inquiry, the 3 people immediately stopped talking and prepared to participate in the ceremony. Theodore Roosevelt even tightened his clothes and appeared in front of everyone with a smile on his face. Following his appearance, there was a burst of cheers at the scene, and it was not clear whether it was for the warship that was about to be launched or for the Vice Minister of the Navy. But it seemed that Theodore Roosevelt was enjoying it as he waved to those attending the ceremony. This good friend of ours seems to enjoy being a public figure very much. He feels similar to veterans who have been in politics for decades. Dewey spoke to Major General Samplin about his views on Theodore Roosevelt. Your Right, maybe you might call him President Roosevelt from now on. Samplin strongly agreed with Dewey's words. Your Excellency, Deputy Minister, this is champagne. Roosevelt, who was completely unaware of the two men's comments, took a 5-liter bottle of champagne tied with flowers and threw it towards the bow of the US Pennsylvania 5 meters away point in the expectant eyes of everyone. The champagne was smashed to pieces, and then the Pennsylvania slowly slid towards the sea. And after catching a wave, it stopped steadily in the sea point. The crowd cheered again, cheering for the launch of the battleship. Chapter 394, Helping the National Party. Although the launch of the Pennsylvania-class patrol is a big deal to the United States, it is nothing to the world. Countries are still doing what they should do. After all, although North America is no longer a remote area for Europe, it is not yet the center of the world, and the center still belongs to Europe. Point of course, for Eudocrus, other European countries are nothing. He needs to pay more attention to the survival of the party. Point yes, the National Socialist Party, which currently has only a little over 3,000 members, is now indeed an out-and-out small party. Although the party's numbers have not continued to decline, but have grown slightly, the survival and growth of the party is a serious issue for the top executives of the executive committee, including Eudocrus. Yes, the drastic reduction in personnel has also led to a reduction in investors. Now the National Socialist Party can only receive a maximum of about 50,000 lire per month, which is a drop of about 95% from nearly 1 million when the party was founded. A sharp drop in funding is a matter of life and death for any political party. You must know that no matter what a political party does, it needs money. It needs money to speak at rallies, to organize an event, to run a newspaper, to express its own party's remarks. Even if it does nothing, it still needs money. Yes, this is how political parties consume funds, and it is the same for any political party. For the National Socialist Party, which lacks sufficient funds for activities, insufficient funds mean that the party cannot develop and grow. After all, even the expenses required for rallies need to be carefully considered. How much influence can its influence have? Hope. The National Socialist Party is also well aware of the simple truth that politics cannot be played without money. For this reason, Eudocrus, the leader of the party, almost lost his scalp due to funding problems. Secretary General, Mr. Ferreira is here. The secretary's announcement immediately cheered up Cruz. Half of the cigarette in his hand was directly submerged among the many cigarette butts in the ashtray. At the same time, Cruz quickly took care of his messy hair and simply straightened out his wrinkled clothes. In just 10 seconds, Cruz had completely wiped out his decadent look, and at the same time a confident smile appeared on his face, making him completely different from before. What makes Cruz take such a solemn attitude is that he is currently the major donor of the National Socialist Party. This person brought them a huge sum of 200,000 lire at the most difficult moment for the party organization. Later, he introduced his friends to become sponsors of the party organization. Currently, half of the sponsorship funds of the party organization are sponsored by him and his friends. Therefore, it cannot be too solemn. Hello, Mr. Ferreira. While waiting for the young Mr. Ferreira to appear, Cruz greeted the donor with enthusiasm. Hello, Mr. Ferreira. Hello, Mr. Cruz. Give Mr. Ferreira a cup of black tea. Remember to ask for black tea from the Far East. After the black tea was poured, Cruz continued. Thank you, Mr. Ferreira, for your help these days. If it weren't for the friendly sponsorship of you and your friends, our party might have been disbanded. If there is anything we can do to help, please don't be polite. Cruz also has a reason for saying this. Ferreira and his friends are big donors to the National Socialist Party. Although Cruz and the others have been playing politics for a relatively short time, they are somewhat familiar with some of the rules between donors and political parties. What puzzles them the most is that, although their big donors have donated generously, they have never proposed any require point. Although Ferreira was fooled by this kind of helpful behavior without asking for anything in return, he was fooled by his appreciation of the National Socialist Party's ideas. But no one is a fool. It is obvious that Cruz and others would feel untrue if they did not ask for anything in return. Or are they worried, as for help, your party is currently not able to provide me with the help I need. It's Not like Ferreira couldn't understand the intention of Cruz's words and directly told the other party that you were not strong enough. Although this is a bit hurtful, it is true. How effective can the National Socialist Party, which currently has only more than 3,000 people, be? But I have a little suggestion for your party. I wonder if Mr. Cruz is willing to take a look. Well, this is not about mentioning your own conditions, but rather suggestions. Although I don't know what the big benefactor of my family wants to do, how can I refuse at this time? Of course we are willing, and we also want to see outsiders give us valuable opinions and suggestions. As he spoke, Cruz took over a document without any cover, with only a few words of proposal written on it. All the suggestions that can be given are listed above. Mr. Cruz may wish to take a look first. Of course, Cruz would not remain indifferent when facing the financial sponsor, and immediately started to take a look. This was so incredible that Cruz's eyes were directly attracted to it. There are a lot of suggestions listed in detail above, from organizational structure to personnel recruitment, and even various concepts and slogans, which are simply tailor-made for their party. Especially the slogan, "One country, one nation, one voice." This sentence directly touched Cruz's heart. Of course, in addition to these favorite contents, there are also some contents that are thought-provoking, such as suggesting that the party needs to pay attention to the petty bourgeoisie and the people at the bottom, especially those affected by the drought this year, and needs to listen to their opinions. There are also other policies, such as using part of the funds to build food soup kitchens for the unemployed and homeless, providing housing, distributing clothes and food, etc. It is necessary to show the superiority and organizational power of the National Socialist Party among all parties, so that people will feel bright. For example, in terms of uniforms, whether it is a party gathering or a speech, party members must wear consistent uniforms, giving people a powerful and shocking feeling. Well, some time traveler put it together like a hodgepodge of ideas that he knew. These sufficiently advanced concepts greatly shocked the country bumpkin in front of him, and at the same time, opened a door for Cruz, a door that was different from others. Mr. Ferreira, this suggestion is very suitable for our country's Socialist National Party. I believe that your suggestion will be implemented by us. Thank you for your selfless help. At this time, Cruz didn't even use any pretense and directly expressed his gratitude. No need to thank me. I have requirements for giving you this proposal. Only then did Ferreira make the request, which made Cruz realize that this person was not a simple person. Perhaps, as someone said, this person was probably sent by a big shot. I hope your party can develop southward, especially in the poorer south, where people urgently need responsible people like your party. Of course, it is impossible to just make a request without giving anything in return. Mr. Ferreira continued. If you can perform well enough, then my friends and I are willing to increase the sponsorship amount to 500,000 to 1 million lire, depending on your party's performance. Now, Cruz could be sure that the other party was really sent by a big shot, and only big shots would make such a request. Of course, being able to become a pawn is simply great for the current National Socialist Party. They are not afraid of being used, but they are afraid of being forgotten. What is the difference between a politician being forgotten and directly shooting him? No problem. Our party will fulfill this request. I don't know how to achieve your request. It's very simple. Come up with your party's ideas and survive locally. It's a deal. It's a deal. Chapter 395 Main Incident. The arrival of 1898 was a continuation of tragedy for the Cuban people. Under a series of brutal suppressions by Cuban Governor Wheeler, the Cuban uprising suffered another heavy blow. The leader of the rebel army, Maximo Gomez, was even forced to hide in the mountains and forests. If anyone familiar with history sees this scene, they may wonder why the Cuban uprising turned out like this. The reason is simple. Governor Wheeler of Cuba has not been removed from office. The most dangerous enemy to the rebels has always been the governor of Cuba, and his encirclement and suppression of the rebels has never stopped for a moment. This step-by-step strategy allowed the rebels to never rest for a moment, and could only continue to deal with the Spanish encirclement and suppression troops in the mountains. Such a high-intensity battle was too difficult for the rebels. The constant casualties made people nervous. People left without saying goodbye every day, which gradually caused the rebels to collapse in the mountains and forests. The leader of the rebel army, Maximo Gomez, also had to hide and wait for the opportunity. The reason why Governor Wheeler was not dismissed is also very simple. Although Prime Minister Castillo was also assassinated, he did not die as a result. The anarchist who was assassinating, for some unknown reason, missed his shot with his pistol and did not directly hit his vitals. He only injured his shoulder. Since the Prime Minister was not killed, Madrid did not fall back into political turmoil, and Governor Warrella, who was strongly promoted by the Prime Minister's faction to come to power, did not step down due to lack of support from Madrid. Facing the gradual quelling of the Cuban uprising, the attitude of the United States, separated by an ocean, has become somewhat meaningful. At this time, the New York News and the New York World competed to report on Cuba. In their reports, the Spanish colonial army was causing a series of horrific tragedies in Cuba. It would be too childish to directly kill people. There are countless sensational reports about officers of the Spanish army being bathed in the blood of children, and the Spanish army using children to perform evil rituals. Although the Spanish army did not do a good job in countering the rebellion, it did not act like a medieval wizard. But no matter what, the reports in these two newspapers increased their sales. Of course, if that's all, then we can describe these two newspapers as being for readers, not bottom lines. Then the next report by the New York Journal will be a bit naked. One day in June, the New York Journal published a letter said to be written by the Spanish ambassador to the United States, Dep Dialom, to his friend in Havana. In the letter, the minister hinted at Spanish deception in negotiations for the pending trade deal, and called President McKinley a second-rate statesman. Such naked remarks angered the American people, and one official called the letter the worst insult to the United States in history. Of course, we don't know exactly how the letter got into the hands of the New York Journal, but at least we know one thing: all 4 US cruise ships were put into service last month. Faced with the accusations from the United States, Spanish ambassador to the United States Lome, one of the parties involved, naturally denied it. He said that he had never written such a letter. As for the letter, like his own handwriting, it was forged and came from the Cuban rebellion. Sympathizers do point, however, Lome's words did not appease the American people because major newspapers did not report what he said at all. In addition, the US Navy also announced that it will send the battleship Maine to visit the port of Havana, Cuba. Sending warships to Cuba at this time was obviously an act of demonstration, and Spain did not dare to openly refuse it when facing the powerful United States. So on June 19th, the battleship Maine entered the port of Havana. Here we need to talk about the data of the Maine. Its length is 98.9 meters, its width is 17.4 meters, its maximum draft is 6.9 meters, and its displacement is 6682 tons. The main gun falls on the deck at the stern of the ship, which is not only vulnerable to bad weather, but also prevents the ship from stabilizing its center of gravity, reducing its stability during navigation. In addition, there are 2 main guns on both sides of the ship, arranged in echelons for firing front and rear. It has 4 10-inch, 254mm, Mark II main guns, plus 6 6-inch, 152mm, Mark III type guns, 2 each at the bow and stern. And the last 2 amidships. In terms of crew establishment, the Maine has a total of 355 crew members, including 26 civilians, 290 sailors, and 39 naval officers. From the data point of view, the Maine does not look like a new ship that only appeared in 1895. Instead, it should have been launched in 1885 to be innovative enough. But what can be done about this? The US Navy's shipbuilding industry is like that. Besides, although this ship has only been in service for 3 years, it took 9 years from the time it was launched to the time the US Maine was put into service, just because it needed testing. In addition, the Maine's backwardness is also aimed at a limited number of powerful countries. As for other countries, it is only drooling. Of course, to the Spanish, the Maine was also a behemoth to them. At present, the Spanish Navy's largest warship in the Caribbean is the Alfonso XIII. Its 4,700 tons can only reach a speed of 14 knots. As a cruiser that has been in service for 24 years, its combat effectiveness is worrying point. So, when the Maine arrived, the Spanish Navy was left with nothing but envy point. Of course, the arrival of the Maine also inspired American planters. In recent years, the United States has invested heavily in sugarcane planting and sugar production in Cuba. Every year, Cuba transports over $100 million worth of sugar to the United States across the sea. It is precisely because of this benefit that the United States values Cuba so much. But the Maine's visit would do the same to Cuba's colonial troops. Its warships cannot go ashore, so what threat can they pose? Life still needs to go on, and everyone should do whatever they need to do. The officers and soldiers of the Maine also took advantage of their free time to stroll around Havana. Everything was so natural, except for the topic of the Cuban insurrectionists, rioters, that made both parties unhappy. Life was just like that. 10 days passed quickly like this, and except for the addition of the Maine, everything was the same in Havana's port. It was late at night on July 2nd, and the port of Havana was as quiet as ever. The officers and soldiers of the Maine, in addition to their normal duties, also fell asleep. At this moment, a violent explosion sounded, and the fierce explosion woke up the entire Havana. At this time, the Maine exploded. A large hole was blown directly into the bottom of the port side of the Maine, and ferocious seawater poured directly into the cabin of the Maine. At this time, the Maine was in a resting state, and the hatches were basically not closed. The ferocious seawater poured directly into the cabin. Flood into it. The Maine sank into the harbor shortly after the explosion. The explosion killed a total of 261 people, and 16 of the 94 survivors were injured. The explosion of the Maine in Havana harbor directly pushed the already tense relations between the United States and Spain into a more dangerous situation. Chapter 396 Method. The explosion of the Maine was known to the United States the next day, and major newspapers rushed to report the incident. The US Navy also immediately launched an investigation into the matter. Of course, until the investigation is clear, it is fair to say that no one knows what caused the explosion of the Maine. But it is a pity that there is no justice in this matter. After the news of the explosion of the Maine was published in the newspapers, all kinds of rumors and gossip spread. Of course, what kind of gossip does this mean? Sorry, it really does. The New York News used a leading headline to attribute the sinking of the Maine to Spain, arousing public anger. For this reason, after the Spanish ambassador protested, a reward of $50,000 was directly offered for evidence of the crime. The various excessive reactions of American newspapers all reflect the attitude of the US government behind them. This is definitely not going to be good. As the Prime Minister of Spain, Castillo immediately sensed the bad intentions of the United States. So when the news of the Maine's explosion in Havana harbor reached Madrid, he immediately summoned the ministers to discuss countermeasures. Everyone, you must know what happened in Cuba. We need to think of a countermeasure immediately here. From the very beginning, the Prime Minister made clear the seriousness of the problem. Everyone present already knew what happened in the port of Havana, Cuba, so they understood the current urgency and naturally agreed with the Prime Minister's words. At present, the United States has sent a request to our country for its own investigation. Taking into account the current actual situation, I have agreed to the request of the United States. In addition, in view of the situation that occurred on the Maine in our port, we can provide help to the surviving officers and soldiers. In addition, we can also provide other assistance to the United States, such as supplies, equipment calls, and inquiries of nearby personnel, etc. Foreign Secretary Jobs briefed the Prime Minister and colleagues present on the current situation and strategies of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Although this may sound a bit condescending, if you consider the power gap between the two countries, then this problem will be easily solved. In this era of the jungle, weakness is the original sin, and Spain, the former world hegemon, also wants to submit to its malicious neighbors. After Foreign Secretary Jobs spoke, other ministers also expressed their opinions. But basically they all have the same idea as the Foreign Secretary, and try to avoid conflicts with the United States as much as possible. Facing the meaning of the minister's words, Castillo also knew very well that in fact it would be good if we could talk about anything, but there were some things that had to be prevented first. So he turned to Admiral Cervera, the Minister of the Navy, and asked, Admiral Cervera, what do you think of this? Facing the Prime Minister's question. Admiral Cervera felt a pain in his heart, but he answered without changing his expression. Your Excellency Prime Minister, our Navy is always ready to fight, and ready to fight for the kingdom, Admiral. Cervera's answer was cunning, because he did not put forward any opinions and everything depends on the government's decision point. However, the Prime Minister didn't seem to care much. He ignored General Cervera and continued talking to other ministers. This emergency meeting lasted for more than 2 hours, and the final result of the discussion was that Spain should try its best to cooperate with the US investigation regarding the explosion of the main. In addition, if the United States has other intentions, Spain needs to be prepared as soon as possible. Yes, the people present are all high-ranking Spanish officials, and they naturally know the United States' greed for Cuba, so some things must be thought of ahead of time. After the meeting was over, Castillo immediately spoke. Admiral Cervera will stay here for a moment. Other ministers were not surprised at all that Admiral Cervera, the Minister of the Navy, was retained. How could we not say a few words alone at this moment, when the Navy might be used? Let's talk in my office. Before General Cervera could speak, Prime Minister Castillo spoke directly. After arriving at the Prime Minister's office and the secretary brought 2 cups of coffee, Prime Minister Castillo spoke. Do you have any doubts about fighting the United States? Yes, Prime Minister. In fact, Admiral Cervera also wanted to say it without the Prime Minister asking, but it was not easy for him to say it in front of everyone. Prime Minister, the current situation of the Spanish Navy is not good. If there is a war between our country and the United States in the future, there is a high probability that our country will be defeated. Although Prime Minister Castillo did not have high expectations for the Navy, the Prime Minister himself was a little surprised to point out the poor situation of his Navy so bluntly. Didn't we just bring back 2 powerful Garibaldi-class battleships from Italy? I remember what you said at the time, but as long as there are 2 of these battleships, the Americans will think twice before they act. Well, the Prime Minister still remembers the hay cow that Admiral Cervera boasted about, so he is cheating himself. However, Admiral Cervera still had answers to the Prime Minister's questions. Prime Minister, the result of the United States thinking twice is the launch of 4 Pennsylvania-class cruise ships. Although this cruise ship is not as powerful as our Garibaldi class, we cannot make up for the numerical advantage. In addition, the United States also has 4 battleships, and our country, except for the Columbus and Francisco, no other warships can currently compete with it. Yes, the Spanish Navy led by Admiral Cervera also has difficulties. That is, although Spain's current naval tonnage seems to be okay, it does not have many warships that can fight. Currently, in the Spanish Navy, in addition to the 2 Garibaldi-class ships, the next most powerful ones are the first-class armored cruiser Carlos V and the second-class battleship Peleo. Unfortunately, it may be difficult to get these 2 warships to fight. Among them, the Carlos V is still being launched and outfitted, and has not officially entered service. As for the Peleo, this ironclad ship customized in France is being overhauled and refitted after more than 10 years of service. It is currently unable to go to sea. Well, in addition to these 2 ships, the Spanish Navy can only use 3 armored cruisers, Queen Maria the Sa, Admiral Oquendo, and Vizcaya. Historically known as these 3 patrol ships carried the Garibaldi-class Columbus purchased from Italy. After adding a few small ships, they went into battle. The other warships were either in the dock or not strong enough to take them out. As for other warships, they either have no actual combat effectiveness, or are still under construction. One more thing, there are several sailing wooden warships in the Spanish Navy, Numancia, Victoria, etc. It can be said that, even if Spain has added 2 of its most powerful patrol ships, its strength is still not as good as that of the US Navy. The opponent has 4 Pennsylvania-class cruisers, 3 Indiana-class battleships, and 1 Iowa, a major modification of the Indiana class, the first true ocean-going battleship in the United States. In addition, the US Navy also has 2 large armored cruisers, the 8,200-ton New York, the more powerful 9,200-ton Brooklyn, 2 Columbia-class protected cruisers, and a 5,800-ton protected cruiser Olympia. These 3 battleships, they all have good fire protection and can run at a speed of 21 knots. There are also 5 protected cruisers, all of which are around 4,000 tons. They were all in service from 1989 to 1990. Their speed is only 18 to 19 knots, which is not outstanding enough. In addition, there are a variety of coastal defense armored ships, small cruisers, destroyers, torpedo boats, etc. Apart from anything else, once the wealth of all parties is revealed, it is obvious that the Spanish Navy is not satisfied. So after Admiral Cervera finished talking about the gap in naval strength between the two sides, Prime Minister Castillo looked unhappy. So, the Navy can no longer guarantee Cuba's maritime security, although he knew that it was rude to say this. Admiral Cervera, who knew that he could no longer hide it at this time, immediately answered, "Yes, Prime Minister, unless we can have at least 3 new battleships and supporting well-trained officers and soldiers, it will be really difficult to keep Cuba, Admiral." Cervera's words plunged the Prime Minister into deep thought, and suddenly a flash of inspiration flashed through him. "What did you just say? Repeat it again." Although he didn't know why the Prime Minister asked this, Admiral Cervera still repeated his words. "I said that, unless we can have at least 3 new battleships and well-trained officers and soldiers, it will be really difficult to keep Cuba." "Okay, I get it, Prime." Minister Castillo now feels somewhat confident, but whether it will be successful or not still needs to be discussed. After seeing off the Navy Minister, he picked up the phone. "Please ask the Foreign Secretary to come over. I have something to talk to him about." Cuba is Spain's treasure, and nothing can be taken away from it. If necessary, there might be another way to save it. Look at Spain's attitude towards Cuba. Both Cuba and the Philippines were in rebellion at this time, but the Philippines received no support at all, and basically relied on its military garrison. Even if the Philippine rebels have grown in size, Spain still prioritizes ensuring that Cuba and its nearly 200,000 troops on the island speak for themselves. Compared with Cuba, there are only more than 30,000 troops stationed on the Philippine island. At this time, some negative assets may be sold. In order to save Cuba, Prime Minister Castillo will also take ruthless measures. Chapter 397, Solving the Sudan Problem. "What did you say?" Carlo looked at the foreign minister in front of him in surprise. Seeing his monarch's surprised expression, Bacona was also deeply moved. Who would have thought that the Spanish would make such a request and want at least 3 Italian Turin-class battleships? Yes, the solution that Prime Minister Castillo came up with was to borrow battleships. This was only 3 years after the Sino-Japanese War of 1894 to 1894. The glorious deeds of the Italian army were borrowed by the King people to fight in the Far East, and they are still mentioned by various media from time to time. How could Castillo, as the Prime Minister of the country, not know this clearly? So after Admiral Cervera mentioned the lack of warships, he immediately thought of Italy. There is no way. This impression is too deep and cannot be changed at all. That's why Spain wanted to test Italy's attitude through diplomatic channels. By the way, what exactly is Spain planning to do? Do you have any other ideas regarding the loan in Spain? Carlo does not know the specific situation yet and plans to find out first. Faced with Carlo's inquiry, the Foreign Secretary, who knew that this matter was of great importance, immediately replied, "According to the news sent back by our embassy in Madrid, the Spaniards obviously want to adopt the methods of the King people, but the price is much worse than that of the generous King people. They are not financially wealthy and want to be paid in other ways." When Carlo heard this, he couldn't help but ask, "Other methods?" "Yes, otherwise. The reason is Spain's own poor financial situation." Well, Carlo can understand this, because Spain's financial situation is the worst in Europe. How bad Spain's financial situation is can be seen from the national debt it issues. Spanish government bonds are currently the least popular in the bond market, and their interest rates have always been among the highest among bonds in various countries. Those who buy Spanish government bonds are basically gamblers who are greedy for its high interest rates. Moreover, the scale of the national debt carried by Spain is also very large. The scale of 8 billion pesos is completely overwhelming for the poor Spanish economy. The term debt to survive is very suitable for Spain. So for the Spanish government, which has no money in its pocket, it would be best to use other methods to pay. However, for Italy, if you want to rent warships and personnel, you can't do it without money. At present, Italy itself is still financially tight. The previous drought has consumed 800 million lire funds. The Spaniards want to pay in other ways, and they also need Italy. Just agree, we can talk to Spain about leasing warships, but when it comes to paying remuneration, your Ministry of Foreign Affairs must demand remuneration that can be cashed at any time. Your Ministry of Foreign Affairs must flexibly control this aspect. Faced with Carlo's words, His Excellency the Foreign Secretary also responded positively. Yes, 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 our Ministry of Foreign Affairs will pay attention to the actual situation and act accordingly. Admiral Yagi, are there no problems with your navy? After discussing with the Foreign Secretary, Carlo asked the Navy Minister, who had not spoken for a long time, if Spain wants to lease warships. Of course it needs the permission of the Navy, so in addition to the Foreign Minister, the Navy Minister must also be consulted for discussion. Your Majesty, everyone in the Navy is willing to contribute to the kingdom. Of course, we have a few small requests. The Navy, represented by Admiral Yagi, also has some ideas of its own point, since he wants to use the Navy. How could Carlo not satisfy his wish? Carlo said immediately, if you have anything to say, just tell me. As long as it's not too difficult, I will consider it. Your Majesty, can you directly sell 3 Turin-class ships to Spain? Admiral Yagi stated the Navy's wishes. Carlo and Bacona understood the Navy's plan. As soon as they heard it, they just wanted to exchange the old for the new. Don't blame the Navy for having this idea. Although the 3 Turin-class ships have worked hard over the years and are still the most powerful battleships in Italy, the Genoa class has not yet entered service. The Turin class has been in service for almost 10 years after all, and has also experienced after one big battle and more than 10 small battles. The battleship has already suffered various hidden injuries that cannot be solved. And if Spain uses it again, it will be 2 wars and the damage will inevitably be more. This is of course quite uneconomical for the Italian Navy. Although the warships and officers and soldiers dispatched also made money, considering the current government's situation, there is a high probability that the money will be used by the government for other purposes. Moreover, the next government financial situation needs to be taken into consideration, so if it wants to replace its warships, the Navy needs to think of more ways. So after careful consideration, the Navy planned to take advantage of the opportunity to sell the Turin class for money while it was still valuable. The Navy was trying to raise some funds to prepare a new warship. I don't know if this can be done, but it requires help from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Although the Navy had a good idea, it still needed help from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so it could only leave it to Bacona. Seeing this question being pushed in front of him by His Majesty, and looking at the expectant Navy Minister, Bacona could only answer, I will talk to the Spanish side about this matter. According to Spain's current urgency, it should not be a big problem, but this is not certain. After all, you know how bad Spain's financial situation is. I don't know if we can negotiate a solution. Appropriate price, it doesn't matter. As long as it's not too bad, we can accept it. Besides, we also need to provide officers and soldiers on board the ship. Spain can't offer to lower price. Admiral Yagi is very confident in the selling price. After all, he still has to rely on Italian naval officers and soldiers to fight. Do the Spaniards dare to give a low price? Since the Navy is so confident, what else can I say? Let's just follow the Navy's approach. Later, Carlo continued to discuss other issues with the 3 people, but after the general direction was decided, everything else was easy to discuss. When they were almost done talking, they heard a knock on the door. Before Carlo could ask any questions, the guard's voice came directly from outside the door. Your Majesty, British Ambassador Madison is asking for an audience. He said he has made an appointment with you. The guard's words made Foreign Minister Bacona a little embarrassed. Ambassador Madison relied on the influence of the British Empire to discuss many matters directly with King Carlo, completely ignoring him as the Foreign Secretary. Then, let's talk about this today. Carlo felt that the conversation was almost over, and it was appropriate to end it at this time. Okay, Your Majesty, since the king said so, what else could the 2 of them say? They just packed up and left. After the 2 left, Ambassador Madison came over with a serious look on his face. Your Majesty Carlo, I remember that Your Majesty promised not to take any action on the Sudan issue before. Then I would like to ask, why do your affiliated countries occupy part of Sudan's territory? Ambassador Manderson scolded Carlo as soon as he opened his mouth. It seemed that he was here to punish the enemy. Point regarding Ambassador Manderson's performance. Even Carlo, who had a calm personality, flashed a hint of anger. The ambassador didn't take Carlo seriously anymore. After all, he was the monarch of a country. Is this person confused and dared to speak like this? No, there is something wrong with Ambassador Manderson's attitude. He is not usually like this. Is this because he wants to anger himself? Although it is not clear what the true attitude of the ambassador is, it does not hinder Carlo's next answer. I saw him smiling. What do I think it is? It turns out to be this. Ambassador Manderson, you are right. I did say that our country would not stand in the way of your country on the Sudan issue. But I cannot restrain Sudan from provoking a by the Kingdom of Xenia. Point at that time, Sudan took the initiative to launch an attack on the Kingdom of Abyssinia, and the Abyssinian army later counterattacked and attacked all the way to Khartoum. The Sudanese knew they were outmatched, so they were willing to cede territory and pay compensation. This matter has been written into in the peace treaty between the Sudan and the Kingdom of Abyssinia. Moreover, the Kingdom of Abyssinia's attack on Sudan was also helping your country. Otherwise, your country would not have captured Khartoum in May. Although Abdullah ran away, Sudan's combat effectiveness was basically eliminated. It was wiped out, so your country should give thanks to the Kingdom of Abyssinia. Yes, Carlo is also reasonable. Of course, in this era, people are not particular about not asking for anything in return, so it is reasonable to get some compensation. Carlo's shamelessness made Ambassador Manderson even more angry. Your Majesty Carlo, I also ask your Majesty to note that the land of Sudan is a colony of the British Empire. Although it fell into the hands of the rebels before, this does not mean that we will recognize the treaty signed by the rebels. Sorry, Ambassador Manderson, I want to correct you. Sudan is not a colony of your country. It can only be regarded as Egyptian land. And this land has been away from Egypt for more than 10 years. Then we have reason to believe that this has formed a new government. Even if you are dissatisfied, the most I can do is talk to Egyptian officials about Sudanese issues. Yes, this is a reason why Carlo dared to promise King Menelik II of Abyssinia to keep the territory he occupied for him. Sudan was previously developed under the order of the Egyptian monarch Ismail Pasha. Although it mainly recruits adventurers from various countries, this is nominally Egyptian territory. What does it have to do with the British? Carlo's words made Ambassador Manderson pause. This was indeed his negligence. But although Sudan is Egyptian territory, but your country occupies Sudanese territory, then Egypt may send mercenaries to take back the area. Faced with Ambassador Manderson's somewhat angry excuses and threats, Carlo stood up immediately. If this is the case, then the Kingdom of Abyssinia may also send mercenaries to retake the area for it. If this results in any catastrophic consequences, do you think this is reasonable? Ambassador Manderson was caught off guard by Carlo's sudden toughness. More importantly, the attitude in Carlo's words made him unable to accept it. He could not bear this responsibility. Perhaps His Majesty is right. It is best for Egypt and the Kingdom of Abyssinia to discuss this matter. Ambassador Manderson's words convinced Carlo that the British did not particularly care about the Kingdom of Abyssinia occupying part of the Sudanese territory. Of course, Carlo might be able to press down on the dispute over the Kingdom of Abyssinia occupying part of the Sudanese territory, but he could do nothing about the dispute between the United States and Spain. Thank you for your support, book friends. Here, Mantau wishes you all good health and happiness in the new year. Chapter 398. The situation worsens. There are many people in the harbor of Havana. Some of the buildings of the battleship Maine, which was sitting on the bottom due to the explosion, are still exposed on the water. However, on the still exposed buildings of the Maine, an investigation team from the United States is conducting an investigation. Quick, pull up. A naval officer who was pulling the rope immediately shouted when he felt movement on the rope. Then he and several other officers immediately pulled the rope up. Under the rope, a man wearing a diving suit and a diving helmet was pulled up. Come up, how's it going, Colonel Melville? Before the man could take off his diving suit, a large group of naval officers gathered around him and started questioning him. How About to wait until I take it off, Major. Melville took off his heavy diving suit and helmet before he spoke. I observed the explosion wounds on the main, and there were signs of the ship's side turning outwards. Okay, let's talk about it later. Colonel Jovan Lloyd, the leader of the investigation, stopped the Navy's chief engineer from speaking point. After taking this man aside to an uninhabited corner, Colonel Lloyd spoke. Well, Melville, you can say it now. I observed that the explosion hole on the side of the main was turned outward, indicating that the explosion on the main came from inside the ship. The explosion point was in the coal seam bunker, which is adjacent to the ammunition bunker, so it is very likely that the explosion was caused by the ammunition bunker. And the explosion in the ammunition bunker may also have been caused by the spontaneous combustion of thermal coal in the coal bunker. Melville deserves to be the chief engineer of the US Navy. After some investigation, he made enough judgments about the explosion of the main. Speaking of spontaneous combustion of coal seams, this is nothing new for the US Navy. The US Navy has had several incidents of spontaneous combustion of steam coal on warships, and the design of the US main did not take this into account. There is only one gap between the ammunition bunker and the coal bunker. Across a warehouse wall, if spontaneous combustion occurs in the coal bunker, it will easily lead to the ammunition bunker. This should be caused by unreasonable design point. After hearing Melville's judgment, Colonel Lloyd frowned. Is this your judgment? Yes. Based on my years of experience, this is the result. After hearing Melville's words, Colonel Lloyd immediately retorted, no, this result must be revised. What? Colonel Lloyd stared at the other party and spoke word by word. I said the result must be revised. The main could not be an ammunition depot explosion caused by the spontaneous combustion of a coal bunker, but should be an accident caused by an external mine explosion. But if you modify the results like this, it will be discovered. The Spaniards only need to look at the damage on the main and they will come to the same conclusion as me. Obviously, this Melville should have been in the technical position for a long time, so he thinks everything is simple. So, what? Who will listen to a loser's excuse? Besides, this time our investigation must be that the mine exploded from outside. This is not only the expectation of our Navy, but also the expectation of the government and the American people. We just need an excuse. As for what the real results will be, we don't need to care. If someone does investigate and find other results in the future, at worst, we can just say it was a mistake. Anyway, Cuba will be under our control by then, so we can say whatever we want. After receiving a political education from Colonel Lloyd, Melville, the chief engineer of the United States, listened. Okay, Colonel Lloyd, I'm going to write my report as a mine explosion that caused the main to sink. Very good. This is the outcome of this matter. We just need to hand in this report. In fact, we only need to pretend to be here to investigate. No matter what the outcome of this matter, the Spaniards must pay the price. They took too much money from us. Just as the two of them were reaching an agreement, they heard the voice of a subordinate coming from the side. Colonel Lloyd, can you come here? A few Spaniards came over. They said they wanted to send someone to help us investigate the cause of the main explosion. After hearing his subordinate's words, Colonel Lloyd immediately answered, damn it, tell those Spaniards that we, the US Navy, will handle the investigation of the explosion of the main on our own without their help, so they can leave. The US naval officer who received the order immediately refused the Spanish boarding, and this scene was seen by everyone. Point in a room in the port. Wheeler, the governor of Cuba, saw this situation from a window. It seems that these Americans do not want our people to get close to the broken ship. Yes, Your Excellency Governor, these Americans are really hateful. Do they think we don't know about their support for the rebels? The rebels have become active again in the past half month. Combined with the attitude of the Americans, I'm a little worried. The person speaking was the garrison commander, General Mauro Ravelli. This general in charge of military command is the most sensitive to rebel activities. The rebel activities in the past half month and the attitude of the Americans have made him worried. Reason. Actually, it's not just you. I'm also worried about these Americans. The day before yesterday, Ambassador Depp sent someone to bring a letter saying that the current attitude in the United States towards the kingdom is very bad, and the media and newspapers are adding fuel to the fire, and it is very likely that military measures will be provoked as Cuban officials are separated from the United States by a sea. They feel more about news from the United States than from home, so they judge some things faster than at home. Governor Wheeler's words made General Rivley frown. If we provoke military means, then in terms of navy, our gap is too big. I wonder if there is any way at home. Well, even General Rivley, who was born in the army, knows the maritime gap between the two countries. Regarding the naval issues that General Rivley was worried about, Wheeler did not answer, but instead talked about another question: leave the issues at sea to the Prime Minister and Admiral Cervera to consider. Now we need to consider the issues on land. If the US troops land in Cuba, where will they land, and how should we prevent them? In addition, we also have to deal with the rebels. We must not be vigilant, we must ensure sufficient pressure, and we must not give the rebels a chance to strengthen themselves. But, in this way, our country has lost its sea control. Considering the small terrain of Cuba, our army has no way to defend it. Facing General Rivley, who was still somewhat stubborn, Wheeler planned to provide some information to stabilize his mind. Although this matter is still kept secret, it is still necessary to reveal it to yourself. Don't worry, Rivley, the Prime Minister and the others will find a way. At least we won't completely lose control of the sea. Wheeler's obvious hint made General Rivley feel relieved, but he also had doubts. What method did the Prime Minister use to close the gap with the US Navy? Which country was it? Is it feasible? I almost forgot to say, wish you all a happy New Year's Day. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399: Germany intervenes. General Rivley's worries are actually justified. No, the Prime Minister and others are discussing contact with Italy. Prime Minister, the negotiations with the Italians are not going well. The Italians require us to buy their warships. If we buy a few, they will support us with their people and ships. And Italy currently does not accept mortgages, as long as cash, precious metals and a marketable bond or other property that can be cashed in quickly. In the Prime Minister's office, Foreign Secretary Gibbs reported to Prime Minister Castillo the results of recent negotiations with Italy. After listening to the Foreign Secretary's report, Prime Minister Castillo frowned. Didn't you tell them that we are willing to use Philippine colonial territory as payment? I said, but there is a big gap between Italy's and our valuation of the territory. The main reason is the rebel problem in the Philippines. The Italian side said that some people in the Philippines have announced the establishment of the Philippine Republic. My country has priced Mindanao and the Philippines at 80 million lira. Also had objections. They said that, although Mindanao is large in area, it is sparsely populated and not developed enough. They will need to invest a lot of money to capture the island, and they will also need to pay for counterinsurgency. They are only willing to pay 40 million lira. After hearing the answer from the Foreign Secretary, Prime Minister Castillo put his hand on his forehead and said, I made a mistake. Italy already has Borneo in Southeast Asia, so its interest in Mindanao will not be that great. There is also the drought in Italy last year. The loss is not small, and I probably won't be able to spend any money. Regarding the Prime Minister's words, Gibbs said immediately, Your Excellency Prime Minister, your analysis is almost the same as mine. When I talked with the Italians before, I felt that they value assets that can be cashed in quickly, and Italy's asking price for the 3 Turin-class ships is very high, 80 million lira each. The points cannot be less. Moreover, when it comes to hiring their officers and soldiers, they have to meet the requirements of 5 times the salary and corresponding compensation. This cost is indeed a bit high for our country. As soon as the Foreign Secretary said that the cost was too high, Admiral Cervera on the side quickly took over. The number of warships is already at its lowest. We cannot reduce it, otherwise I will not have the confidence to defend the Cuban colony. Although I know that what General Cervera said is true. What should I do if I don't have money? Admiral Cervera, The problem is that we can't afford that much money at the moment. How about issuing a batch of national bonds now? As expected, the Lord of the Admiralty did not understand finance, and he borrowed money when he was in trouble. Although he was not a financial professional, Gibbs felt he had an obligation to teach the Admiral a lesson. General Cervera, you can't just borrow this debt if you want. It takes time to prepare and at least find an underwriter. There are also many ways to sell bonds, and they all require time to prepare. In addition, our country's national debt is not easy to sell now. The interest rate is double digits. Sure enough, as the foreign minister explained, Admiral Cervera blushed, knowing that he had made a mistake, and now he did not dare to speak nonsense. I, a person who is used to drifting at sea, really don't understand this matter of money, so I will make it difficult for you. Okay. Admiral Cervera stopped talking and let the foreign secretary and prime minister say what they say next. I think we still need to find a way to deal with the money issue. We can't just watch the Americans press forward step by step. Let's give up Cuba. Actually, this is just. As Foreign Secretary Gibbs was about to speak, there was a knock on the door. What happened? Prime Minister Castillo asked loudly and somewhat unhappy. If you don't give him a sufficient reason for disturbing yourself at this time, then the secretary on duty today must be severely punished. Prime Minister, it was Lord Gibbs's secretary who came to him and said that he had urgent news and that he must see him immediately. These words made the three of them feel a sudden thump in their hearts. Not to mention that the United States suddenly declared war on the kingdom. Many of these things were not prepared. Let him in. Following the prime minister's words, the door opened and Gibbs' secretary walked in. Gabrin, what is it that makes you so anxious to come to me? You can tell me now in front of the prime minister. The foreign secretary was also a little dissatisfied with the secretary, who made a reckless move and asked him to speak up quickly. Prime Minister, Your Excellency, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has just received a telegram from Berlin from Ambassador Peretz. It said that the Germans told him that they were interested in purchasing our Philippines for 200 million marks colony. The secretary's words made the three of them overjoyed. This is really a perfect path. Why did the Germans suddenly offer to buy the Philippines? Let us turn the time back to 2 days ago. In the palace in Berlin, Wilhelm II, Prime Minister Schillingsfest, and Foreign Minister Bernhard von Bülow were discussing an important matter. This matter is Spain's plan to sell the Philippines. As an advocate of world empire, Foreign Secretary Bayrou immediately contacted the Kaiser as soon as he got the news and strongly recommended the Philippines to him. According to what he said, the Philippines is expected to become Germany's own Borneo. Yes, Germany has been envious of Italy's gains in Borneo for many years. In addition, Germany's colonial activities are currently suffering huge losses. The colonies captured in Africa over the years have been receiving subsidies from the German Ministry of Finance. This was a bit embarrassing for the Kaiser, who wanted to expand in the world. Of course, another thought that all the good places in the world were taken over by other countries also took root in his heart. So after hearing Bülow's recommendation, the Kaiser was moved, so a brief secret meeting was necessary. Your Majesty, although most of the Philippines is currently occupied by rebels, Philippine land, minerals, and other tropical resources are urgently needed by our country. In addition, we also need to consider the location of the Philippines. This can completely serve us as an important player in the region. Use it as a fulcrum. We only need to occupy the Philippines to expand our influence in the region. In addition, we can also radiate to the southern part of the Qing dynasty in the Far East, which is really beneficial to us. Bülow talked about the advantages of the Philippines over Germany and was recognized by the Prime Minister and the Kaiser. Of course I agree, but there are some things that I have to ask clearly. But the current size of the Philippine rebels has reached more than 100,000. Although our country is not afraid of them, destroying the rebels requires enough energy and expense, and the money is not low at all. In addition, the relationship between the United States and Spain is very tense at present. Worse, it is very likely that a war will break out between the two countries. And if we buy the Philippines now, is it possible that we will become enemies with the United States? Faced with the two questions raised by the Prime Minister, Bayrou immediately explained. Prime Minister, I admit that the problem you mentioned does exist and cannot be concealed. However, we must also consider whether the Philippines is worth our efforts. I think it is worth it. For the rebel problem, we can use the army to quell the rebellion. By the way, just win over a group of local obedient tribes and it only takes a few repetitions to make the local tribes in the Philippines recognize the facts as for buying the Philippines and possibly antagonizing the United States. I think this is not a problem at all. As a world power, does our country need other people's approval to buy a colony? How can such a performance make people recognize that we are a global empire, so we don't want to buy a colony at this time? This should and cannot be a priority. Below's eloquent speech made Kaiser Wilhelm II very angry, so an offer of 200 million marks to purchase the Philippines appeared in the hands of the Spanish ambassador. Chapter 400 German Philippines. Dear Carlo, I didn't know that Italy was talking to Spain about a territorial deal in the Philippines, but when I learned the news, I was surprised. I really want Germany to withdraw from this territorial deal, but the officials and businessmen are simply unwilling to withdraw. It is impossible for me to change the minds of most people, and I also do not want to affect the feelings between you and me, as well as the long-term friendship between Germany and Italy. I hope Carlo can understand that you my most sincere friend, William. Carlo put down the letter in his hand, raised his head, and said to the German ambassador Persson who was waiting for him, I have read the letter from your emperor. I also asked William to send a reply to thank him for his sincerity. Our friendship will not change, nor will the friendship between Italy and Germany. Facing Carlo's words, Ambassador Persson bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, I will send this reply to His Majesty the Emperor right away. Please allow me to retire, please. Ambassador Persson. After waiting for Ambassador Persson to leave, Carlo touched his head with one hand, and side point Germany suddenly intervened to purchase the Philippines. How could this not affect the relationship between the two countries? And how could it not affect his relationship with William? As long as there is a conflict of interest, it will inevitably lead to damage to the relationship between the two parties. Besides, his relationship with the Kaiser was also more about interests than personal matters. In fact, both parties knew this. But having said that, the Philippines alone is not enough to worsen the relationship between Germany and Italy. At most, there seems to be a twist in it point in the final analysis. It is interests that connect the two sides. The two countries complement each other in many ways. For example, Italy has a large demand for German chemical and military technology, while Germany also relies on Italy for shipbuilding technology, power transmission and other aspects. It is precisely because both parties have a lot of needs that the Kaiser's letter came out. This is a step forward for Italy. Of course, Carlo would not really believe that Germany had indeed contacted Spain without knowing it. This was completely impossible. Of course, the next step is coming, and Carlo will definitely have to step down. After all, Italy's demand for Germany is higher than Germany's demand for Italy. It's impossible not to give point. Now that Germany has intervened, Carlo doesn't want to think about the dispensable Philippines. Yes, in Carlo's view, the Philippines is useless for 3 reasons. First, the Philippines has awakened its national ideology, and even if the rebels are suppressed, there will be no peace. Unless Germany intended to transform the national composition of the Philippines, security operations would consume the colonial government's energy. Second, and based on the first point, the price is too high. Now just buying the Philippines basically costs $50 to $60 million. Next, we have to destroy the rebels, and then we need to build and transform. It is impossible to spend less than $150 million. With so much money, the Philippines must earn at least $15 million for Germany every year. This requirement is not low at all. You must know that when Spain had the most profits, it only made $3 million from the Philippines. Although Spain's colonial management is terrible, how good is Germany? If you want to get higher returns, Germany needs high investment. This is the problem. Some people may ask, why do we have to earn so much every year? Why not less? It is indeed not possible, because it is already 1898. If the World War still started according to the original history, it would only take 16 years, which would not even be enough for babies to reach adulthood. Of course, who can say for sure about these things now? It is still uncertain whether history will continue to develop in this waypoint, but now, Carlo has taken up the idea of Spain, which has not yet received funds. Invite Foreign Minister Bacona. I have something to ask him. I have met His Majesty. Without keeping Carlo waiting, Bacona arrived at the palace within half an hour. Your Excellency Bacona, the terms of our negotiations with Spain can be changed. You tell them that our 2 Venetian-class ships can also be sold, also with retired officers and soldiers. Let the ambassador in Madrid tell the Spanish foreign minister. It seems to be called Gibbs. Yes, Your Majesty, the foreign secretary is indeed named Gibbs, but it was his Prime Minister Castillo who recently discussed with our ambassador in Madrid. Wait a minute. You're saying that the person was changed in the middle of the negotiation, and the foreign minister is not here? I don't know if he is here or not, but the substitution is certain. People were replaced mid-negotiation. So where was Gibbs? In a room in the Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin. The much remembered Mr. Gibbs was here, and with him was the German Foreign Minister Bernhard von Gillow. Yes, the two were having secret talks, secret negotiations without the presence of a third person, and the content of the negotiations was exactly the Philippine colony. Both parties have received sufficient authorization, and of course confidentiality is taken into account. Both parties need it, so the fewer people negotiating, the better. Mr. Gibbs, we in Germany have given us the greatest sincerity. The price of 230 million marks is already the limit of what we can afford to buy the Philippines and the Pacific Islands, where most of the territory of your country is occupied by rebels. The Pacific Islands, the value is limited, and if it is worth 5 million marks, we are generous. As for the Philippines, we still need to consider counterinsurgency and other expenses when buying it, so this price is also our final offer. Gibbs would definitely sneer at the final quote claimed by Gillow. The final quote had increased from 200 million marks to 230 million marks. Can this be believed? Your Excellency below, I admit that the price of your country is quite high, but please note that what we are about to sell is a vast colony with a population of tens of millions and an area of 300,000 square kilometers. It is rich in products, whether it is cash crops or not. It has a high output of grain, and it also has a lot of minerals. For such an excellent colony, although there are a few rebels, 230 million marks is indeed not a gratifying price. Hearing Gibbs' cliché words, Biro felt a little depressed, but fortunately he had a trump card. Mr. Gibbs, I acknowledge what you said, but there is one thing I need to state in advance. If the United States takes the lead in seizing the Philippines, our country will not pay for the colonies that were taken away from your country. Below's words made Gibbs a little confused, and a bad thought emerged in his mind. Your Excellency Biro, I don't know what you mean by this. Nothing. I just want to tell you something. The acting Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt sent a telegram to Commodore Dewey, the commander of the Asia Fleet, saying that the Asia Fleet can prepare for battle in advance. What? Gibbs was frightened by Gillow's words, and of course he knew what it meant at this time. If it is true, then we can no longer dwell on these issues at this time. We should give up our illusions and prepare for war. The sale of the Philippine colonies cannot be delayed any longer. I'm sorry, can I send a telegram to China first? No problem, please do. The next day, an agreement was reached between Germany and Spain on the sale of the Philippines and the Pacific Islands. Germany provided Spain with 230 million marks in emergency loan funds for 1 year, with Spain using the Philippines and Pacific Islands as collateral. If the principal and interest of 350 million marks cannot be returned when due, Germany will have the right to confiscate the Philippines and the Pacific Islands. In addition, in order to ensure that the loan can be repaid, Germany has the right to station troops in the Philippines and even collect taxes and manage things from the date of signing the treaty. Well, this is actually the sale of the Philippines and the colonies of the Pacific Islands. It is just to make Spain look better, so it is used as an excuse to use loans and mortgages. On the second day after the treaty was signed, Germany formed a government team for the German Philippines. It seemed that Germany could not wait to take over the Philippines. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.